Chapter 1914. It wasn't that the Alliance hadn't lodged a diplomatic protest with the Horde. If he could listen, then he wouldn't be brain-dead roar. Not only was he ashamed of it, but he was proud of it. The Horde doesn't understand what you're talking about, but if the Alliance dares to step into our territory, the Horde will fight. Brain-dead roar's clean rebuttal made Galavix even more moved. He turned around and asked Brain-dead roar for all the Taurans who had surrendered in the last war and dragged them to the mines as slaves to mine. In fact, Gurus Hellscream had always had a very complicated fear of the Alliance. From childhood, youth, and adulthood, he had stayed in Nagrand, waiting for death. Even though the other half of his vision was the lush green Nagrand, every day he watched the gradually collapsing world and the floating islands in the sky because of the chaotic gravity. He had always felt fear. Finally, one day, the ancestors he had been praying for sent people to save him. The leader was, of course, Thrall, but it wasn't the great chief's orc army that brought the 2 million orcs out of that dangerous place, but the Alliance's flying battleships. Gurus would never forget the first time he had seen those giant artificial objects that were hundreds of meters long soar into the sky and take him and his people away. It had given him the feeling that a different race, mainly humans, had used their wisdom and power to defeat nature and conquer the world. After escaping by a fluke, all that was left was a deep sense of fear and inferiority. Compared to this high-tech civilization, the orcs were too primitive and backward. Perhaps in the past, the orcs could use the power of demons to defeat the Draenei, who were few in number. But against a race that had more people than the orcs, a race that was more civilized and more powerful than the orcs, the humans, could the orcs really win? There were no professional psychologists in this world. No one knew that when one's inferiority complex reached its limit, under the pressure of extreme fear, there would only be two possibilities for one's soul: either it would collapse under the pressure, or it would become extremely arrogant in order to vent the pressure on one's soul after the extreme inferiority complex. Gurus was afraid of humans, afraid of Duque, and at the same time, he hated Duque, who had stolen the father he was so proud of. It was this contradictory mentality that caused him to hate the Alliance led by the humans. He would not rest until he destroyed this alliance that threatened him, the orcs, and even the entire tribe. It was with this mentality that he stepped into the door of darkness 28, October. A mysterious figure appeared and satisfied his desire. The former Sun King, Anastrian. Afraid of the Alliance? Actually, even if we can't catch up to the Alliance in a short period of time, as long as we get the weapons that the Alliance doesn't dare to attack us, that's enough. What are you referring to? Bones. Tell me what you think, or I'll tear your bones apart and feed them to my wargs. Garush did not show the slightest bit of respect to the tribe's only Breaking Dawn wizard. Anyway, in his opinion, the wretched wretch who betrayed the High Elves for immortality, betrayed the Forgotten Ones under the pressure of the Lich King, and finally returned to the tribe to seek refuge shamelessly was not worthy of any respect. In a sense, he was right. Anastrian was now a slave to 3 different families. Focusing rainbow. A term that Garush had never heard of came out of that rotten mouth. The former Sun King said in an extremely tempting tone, as the most powerful arcane energy in Azeroth, the Titans gave the Blue Dragons the artifact to control magic. It helps the Spellweavers manage the magic of Azeroth. If necessary, it can even absorb the arcane energy of the entire Azeroth. However, this will make it extremely unstable. If it explodes, it might blow up the entire Azeroth into a second Outland. Oh, our world. Garush's breathing quickened. He was so excited that he could even hear his own intense heartbeat. Every beat was so powerful that it pounded against his chest. It was precisely because he knew that the Alliance had the ability to easily destroy the tribe that he was so irritable and furious. If he could have this thing, he wouldn't have to be afraid of the Alliance. If the Alliance dared to attack, he would dare to blow up the Azeroth. What you said. Is it true? Where is that thing? Even Garush knew that he was a little too eager, and his voice trembled. Coincidentally, I know where that thing has been recently. As the price for me helping the Great Chief control this great weapon, I hope that the Great Chief can also help me with a small matter. Say it. Garush was impatient. I hope to once again become the leader of the Forsaken so that the Forsaken can rejoin the tribe. Humph. That's for sure. That bastard Delano who betrayed his ancestors. Serves him right for not being able to return to the land of ancestral spirits. Garush agreed without hesitation. Just as the tribe was secretly carrying out a new conspiracy. In the conference room of the Dalajan Kirin Tor Council. Unexpectedly, there were no other Kirin Tor Council members here. There were only 3 people sitting in high positions. Each of them was someone who could make the world tremble with just a stomp of their feet in the alliance. Demigod, the current supreme leader of the tidal throne, Queen Naga, vice commander of the alliance navy, Vashj. Demigod, the current supreme leader of the land of fire, Dalajan Kirin Tor Council, leader of the alliance mage army, Kale, that's Sunstrider. Breaking Dawn Mage, the current supreme leader of the Weave, Queen Kurtiras, vice commander of the alliance mage army, Jaina Proudmoore. Under the gazes of the 3 of them, there were 2 demons kneeling on one knee on the marble floor, Eridar and Gemini. Has the fish taken the bait? On the main seat, Jaina asked coldly. It has already taken the bait. As long as that brainless piranha eats this small fish, everything will be ready, Elisa said in a deep voice. There were no loopholes, right? Vashj asked. Queen Sailoras replied, don't worry, we're the best at this kind of thing. And right now, the entire warlock tribe is under our control. As long as Mistress Proudmoore gives the order, we can immediately. Very well, you can leave. There can be no mistakes in this matter. If you mess it up, there's no need for you to exist in this world. Jaina waved her hand. Understood. Eridar and Gemini left. After the Gemini left, Kale, that sighed softly and leaned his body against the back of the bench. Are you all right? Jaina asked. I'm fine. Should I say, as expected? Anastrian is still that stubborn, power-hungry Sun King. Kale's evaluation of his former father was like this. Chapter 1915. After holding power for thousands of years, he wouldn't learn to give it up until the very last moment of destruction. So what if he became a lich? So what if he was once captured by Arthas? Even if he became a marginal figure among the Forsaken, he still couldn't forget power. Although the plan that Duque left behind was a bit sinister, a fly wouldn't bite a seamless egg. If his father hadn't been greedy for power, he wouldn't have fallen for it. However, he didn't hide this plan from Kale, which showed that Duque trusted him quite a bit. A treasure like Focusing Rainbow must not fall into the hands of the Horde, Kale, said resolutely. Don't worry, that brainless roar won't be able to get it. Because there's no Focusing Rainbow in this world, Jaina said with a smile. Could it be? Vashj suddenly realized. Yes, it was taken away by Duque. At this moment, in another timeline. Queen Sylvanas realized that something was wrong almost as soon as she entered this timeline. Disgusting. Such dense magic power. This is. Duque looked up at the purple-blue sky and cursed in his heart, but he quickly calmed down. Damn it, this is the magic net. The magic net that extends from the magic pivot. This timeline is probably the timeline where the Blue Dragon King Maligo succeeded in stirring up trouble and stirring up trouble. Queen Sylvanas raised her golden eyebrows. If the arcane elements completely dominate this timeline, then my strength will be reduced by more than half. Duque smirked. That's not necessarily true. After saying that, he took out a ball that looked like a blue dragon's eyeball as if he was performing a magic trick. This is Focusing Rainbow. Duque's smile widened. I thought of it when I smuggled the soul of the dragon. If an amazing treasure like the soul of the dragon can be brought over 10,000 years in one go by reducing the energy contained in it, then I can also bring over something that doesn't contain much energy but can definitely help me. What are you going to do? Is there a ready-made magic net? That's even better. Duque raised the Focusing Rainbow in his hand. Queen Sylvanas found that the bead was getting bluer and bluer, and it was even emitting a weird blue light. The light blended perfectly with the arcana elements in the sky. 10,000 kilometers away, in Nascent's magic core, the blue dragon on duty was bored to death. Ever since their king, Malygos, took back control of all the arcane energy in Azeroth, the previously arrogant humans, elves, and the Forsaken all became defeated dogs. After a futile struggle, even Alexstrasza had to admit that the Blue Dragon Legion was right. The Blue Dragon army was in a good mood. All of a sudden, the ancient Blue Dragon noticed something amiss. The weave was still filled with a familiar scent, but it felt different. The weave had lost control, but it did not go berserk. It was as if there was a strange existence that was greedily seizing control. Who is it? Malygos suddenly woke up and shouted in the weave. The next moment, he found that the scene in front of him had changed. It was as if he was in the temple of the Pantheon, and the holy elephants of the Titans stood on it, looking at him with profound eyes. My child. I am very disappointed in you. It was the voice of Amon-Thul, the father of the gods. Malygos was so scared that he wet his pants. Duque, who was far away in the Kalimdor continent, smiled and made an okay gesture to Queen Sylvanas. Queen Sylvanas' eyes widened. You deceived the highest authority of the weave? Don't make it sound so bad. I just took back a power that was abused by Malygos on behalf of the Titans. Duque said shamelessly. Okay, now we have to fix this relatively powerful era. It's getting closer to the main timeline. A month later, Queen Sylvanas cursed. Duque. You lied to me. Wah, spare me, wife. No one knew what Duque was doing in the branch timeline. In the main timeline, everything was playing out according to the script. The focusing rainbow was originally a treasure of the Blue Dragon clan, and it could not be lost. However, strictly speaking, the Blue Dragons had already thrown it away twice. When Sapphiron was killed by the second fool, it was inadvertently taken away. However, Malygos, who was still crazy at the time, did not fulfill his duty to guard it, and allowed the treasure passed down to him by the Titan to fall into the hands of the Scourge army. In addition, Kalegos, that trash, had not been able to learn the Titan rune set left by Malygos after so long. In the end, he still could not control the focusing rainbow. After the Wormrest Temple went through a series of changes, and after killing Nesario for the second time, Alexstrasza simply announced that this thing had been taken by Duque to play with. Now, the Blue Dragon army was following the plan that Duque had left behind in advance, transporting a genuine focusing rainbow from the magic pivot to the Wormrest Temple in the Dragonbone Waste. After the end of the cataclysm, Thrall took advantage of the opportunity of the Wormrest Temple to show his face to the Red Dragon Queen for a long time. While making a familiar face, he also helped the tribe clear their names many times, openly or secretly. Unfortunately, with a certain person's plan, as long as the tribe took the bait, they could no longer clear their names. On the highest floor of the Wormrest Shrine, the humanoid Alexstrasza was enjoying the cold wind that was only a chill to her. She was comfortably sitting on a chaise longue that Dumuk had gifted her before he left, crossing her legs and looking very happy. Sister, do you think those green-skinned creatures are really so hateful? Isra, who was also in human form, still had her eyes closed. She sat in a basket woven from vines, swaying and leisurely kicking her long calves. In essence, they are more aggressive than the progenitor dragons. Isra's words undoubtedly sentenced the tribe to death. Although the progenitor dragon was the ancestor of the chromatic dragons, it was famous for being wild and untamed, and had low intelligence. The chromatic dragons were ashamed to admit that the progenitor dragon was their ancestor. I see. Since Duque thinks so, let him be. Alexstrasza turned her head and looked at a magic mirror. Impressively, there was a man wearing a Lich King's helmet. Wother, he really isn't your subordinate, right? I swear in the name of the Holy Light, Wother said solemnly. Pfft. The Dragon King's sisters laughed. A Lich King swearing in the name of the Holy Light, this was really funny. If not for the arrangements that Duque had made in advance, perhaps they really would have believed that it was the remnants of the Scourge army who were causing trouble. This was because in another magic mirror, there was a team of Death Knights riding on ice dragons, attacking the unaware Blue Dragon team. Chapter 1916. After learning of the success of the plan, Great Chief Gurus Hellscream was inexplicably excited. Before the items had arrived, he hadn't slept for a single minute in 72 hours. When Anastrian saw the Great Chief's bloodshot eyes, he was also slightly stunned. Is this, focusing rainbow? Why, so many of them? Brainless Howl wasn't completely stupid. He immediately realized that something was wrong. The pearls in front of him were like eyeballs, with strange vertical pupils and a blue luster. Although every one of them was emitting terrifying energy waves, and even the strongest shaman, Magatha Grim Totem, revealed a serious expression, why did it not match the legends? The Sun King explained, I just found out about the latest news. It seems that the current magic guardian dragon, Kalegos, isn't strong enough to control the complete, focusing rainbow, so he used a secret method unique to the blue dragons. He split it into 7, making it easier to control its power. Is this the so-called Titan language? Gurus pointed to one of the focusing rainbow beads, and a line of words on the pupil. It was a strange square character that no existence in this world had ever seen before. There was only one person in this world who knew how to use it, and that was Duque. Because it was Chinese, not the common language or the orc language. It said, "Dear, gather 7, and you can summon the dragon god." Chiu Mi. Of course, no one would understand it. Before Dumuk left, he was deliberately being mischievous. Well, even being mischievous was fun. Brainless Howl didn't know. He was so excited that he was shivering. Oh, he was shivering all over. Suddenly, he remembered the time when the orc seniors lost the war and were enslaved for 10 years. They would either be dissected every day, or they would fight to the death in the arena just to get a smile from the human nobles, and pray that the human bosses wouldn't give them the thumbs up. That feeling of being suppressed, dominated, and locked down was terrible. There was no other way. The human-led alliance brought too much pressure to him, the great chief, and even the entire tribe. The alliance's fleet, from the sea to the air, blocked every route from Kalandor to the sea. From the Grey Valley in the north to the Feathermoon stronghold, Silithus, and Uldum in the west, the expansion of the Horde's territory was restricted from both sides. Not to mention, in the center of the tribal hinterland that was supposed to be connected, there was the strategically important Theramore in the Dustwallow swamp. Even Sal himself admitted that he had underestimated Duque's viciousness. Once upon a time, the tribe only had 100,000 people, which was enough to defend Duroder. Who would have thought that the Horde would be able to expand so rapidly? Not only did they take in a few races, but they were also able to take in more than 2 million orcs from their old home, Nagrand. The population increased, the land became barren, and the territory suddenly became insufficient. Only then did the tribe realize how vicious the alliance was. One Theramore was stuck in the middle, making the tribe feel really bad. After becoming the chief, Garush was constantly thinking about how to get rid of Theramore, who was a thorn in his side. Unfortunately, he didn't dare. Regardless of the difference in combat power and equipment between the two sides, Theramore was a classic example of being easy to defend and difficult to attack. The disgusting shape of the Dustwallow swamp was not suitable for an army to spread out. What's more, Theramore was on an island at the edge of Dustwallow Marsh. A large circle of waterways surrounded Theramore Island. Attacking from land was simply looking for trouble. But the Horde's navy, well, the phrase, 100-year-old navy, was not said casually. First of all, they had to have equipment that was not inferior to the opponent. It would be a joke to use a wooden ship to fight a warship with a steel hull. Then there was the training of the navy. It was not to say that a sailor could become a sailor just by sitting on a ship. Gunners, helmsmen, navigators, experienced captains, these talents could not be trained in a year or two. When the Alliance opened a base on Theramore, it was to bully the Horde for not having a decent navy. But now, with the focusing rainbow, everything was different. It was like a certain transmigrator. Before transmigrating, Sanpang Jin had a nuclear bomb in his hand. If Mi dared to attack him, he would shamelessly throw the nuclear bomb. The feeling of a serf turning over and singing, going from a slave to a slave owner in one breath, was really King awesome. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. The entire Agrima Hero Valley heard Garusha's heroic laughter. The Sun King carefully said, "Great chief, I have found a way to get the thing. But do you want to try it first?" Brainless Roar was a magic idiot. He definitely knew 6 out of 7 things about magic nuclear bombs. In fact, he knew nothing about them. Magatha, come and take a look. Not only Magatha, but he also summoned all the people who could be called magic experts. The result was, of course, his advisors and his subordinates all unanimously agreed that these 7 focusing rainbows could easily absorb all the magic elements in the surrounding atmosphere. As long as a little primer was added, there would be an earth-shattering explosion. Primer? Yes. Only the blood of the blue dragon can activate the focusing rainbow. Okay. I'll leave it to you. Before you succeed, the Horde will not admit that it has anything to do with you. Brainless Roar's instructions made the Sun King curse countless times in his heart. Fortunately, Anastrian was already a skeleton, and there was no expression to reveal. Finally, after 3 months, the Sun King's subordinates succeeded. Thus, the Horde began a merciless confrontation with the Alliance. The entire 27 years of the Dark Portal, all the way until the 29th year of the Dark Portal, the Horde and the Alliance basically spent all their time in various border military conflicts. Both sides deployed a large number of troops in the border area and built various fortresses. Everyone knew that the only reason Garush did not make a move was because he was afraid that Duque's departure was just a pretense. Finally, in the 29th year of the Dark Portal, because Jaina used the magic net to become a demigod, it caused the magic net to be disconnected for half a month. Garush finally confirmed that Duque was really not in Azeroth. On the 1st of April of the same year, the war between the Horde and the Alliance officially began. There was not even a declaration of war. Within a day, the Horde army divided into 3 routes to attack the Alliance's territory. On the northern front, 300,000 troops under the leadership of Varrock Salufar, along with the Goblin Prince Garavix's mercenaries, attacked Grey Valley. On the southwestern front, Markolok led 200,000 orcs and King Jelan Grol to attack the Feathermoon Fortress. On the eastern front, 500,000 orcs divided into 3 routes to attack Dustwallow Swamp. General Nazgûran led the Horde's new navy to attack from the north to the south. Siege craftsman Helix Hesso led a division to attack Dustwallow Swamp's northern barrier, which was now controlled by the Theramorians. Garush personally led the army to attack Dustwallow Swamp. For a moment, both sides had millions of troops, and the bloodiest battle began on the mainland of Kalimdor. Chapter 1917. For the chief, for the tribe. Ah! Bang! Accompanied by a gunshot that sounded like it came from the sky, the orc captain who was still lecturing a second ago was shot in the head and laid dead on the ground. Ah! Captain! Captain is dead. The group of orc recruits panicked. 500 meters away, the sniper and observer who had completed their mission quietly put away their 98K sniper rifle. To make it easier, the sniper removed the suppressor and disappeared into the rocky mountain under the cover of the night. The orc hunting team that arrived 10 minutes later couldn't find anything. Impossible. They should be here. My warg can't smell anything. Damn, if only the trolls were here. The orcs missed the trolls a little. After all, they were the best hunters and trackers. 300 meters away, the sniper team that had just caused trouble was hiding in a camouflage net. They were surrounded by powder that specifically targeted wargs. The 2 people who were at a disadvantage suppressed their laughter until the orc hunting team left. They then started talking. "Boss, it's the 20th one," the observer said. "Yeah, did you see that guy's nameplate?" "Yeah. Boss will probably get promoted when we get back." "I don't want to get promoted. It's more fun to play sniper in the enemy's rear." The sniper smiled and showed a palm that was missing a middle finger. The calluses on his hand proved that he used to be an excellent archer. Normally, he would have retired a long time ago without a middle finger. He was worthless in the old army since he couldn't pull a bowstring. Here, he could still be an excellent sniper. Hee hee, boss, it's a pity that we can't snipe the enemy's officer. Yeah. Centurions and above are all professionals. Unless they hit the throat or something. Last time, I sniped that guy's head 3 times and I couldn't even penetrate his skull. This scene was only a microcosm of the countless battles between the Alliance and the Horde. In the field of normal soldiers, the Alliance had the absolute advantage. With modern rifles, cannons, and other hot weapons in hand, dealing with tribal soldiers with axes and hammers was like cutting chives in a field. They could kill them however they wanted. Against professionals, the effect wasn't as obvious. If the Alliance did not send out professionals, they would often be hit directly by large-caliber cannons, or forcefully suppressed to death by more than one continuous fire cannon, such as 40mm octuple cannon, Bofors machine cannon, etc. Overall, apart from the especially conservative Night Elves, the Alliance had an absolute advantage on all fronts. And this was under the premise that the Alliance hadn't quickly mobilized their flying fleet over. That's right, the Alliance had purposely pulled back their flying fleet. This was common sense in modern military affairs. If there was enough strategic depth, no commander would place their elite troops on the front lines. On Earth before Duque transmigrated, the front lines were always the second-line troops. Because once they were bombarded by the enemy's cannons, the troops at the front would become cannon fodder. The elites would always hide in the back and only come out when the horn of counterattack was blown. On the continent of Kalimdor, the Alliance's flying fleet was deployed in Darnassus in the northwest, and in the southwest, in the depths of the Silithus Desert, which was guarded by insect swarms. Theramore had less than 200 old flying warships, which didn't have the upper hand against the Horde's air force. After all, in the past 3 years, the Horde had been smearing the walls, either by buying or stealing, and had gotten a lot of second-hand flying warships that had been eliminated by the Alliance. Although most of the equipment was removed during the elimination, they could still fight with some modifications. The Horde used 500 steam-powered flying warships to surround more than 200 Alliance warships. Sir! Why can't we fight freely? The Horde's broken toys can be taken care of in 1 round. Sir! The soldiers below are generally complaining that it's too stifling. Sir, as the fleet commander, Admiral Taylor slammed the table. As a new officer in the Alliance, he was also quite ambitious. At the age of 38, he was in the prime of a commander's life. He wouldn't become slow because of old age, and he had more than 10 years of military experience. From Northrend to the Cataclysm, Taylor had been promoted from a small captain in Stormwind all the way to admiral, and he was deeply trusted by William. However, he didn't expect that William would actually give him such a difficult mission after the war had started. A week ago, William called for Taylor. As soon as Taylor entered the storm, he was surprised to see a few big shots of the Alliance. Apart from William, there was also Jaina, the Bronzebeard brothers, and Aurelia. Tyler, the Alliance has an arduous task for you, William said solemnly as soon as he started the conversation. I promise to complete the mission. Admiral Taylor stood at attention and puffed out his chest. Now, a week later, King regretted it. This mission was too ket up. They could only lose, but not win. Furthermore, they had to win by making both sides pay a considerable price. The problem was that the Alliance was practically riding on their faces. How could they lose? In terms of military strength, the Alliance was currently the strongest in the southern continent, followed by the Rotterdam continent, and finally Kalimdor. The Night Elves and Draenei didn't develop modern air forces, so they could only pick the weakest from Rotterdam. Since the Dark Portal, Rotterdam had never been weak. Alterac was the wealthiest, and their warships were the best. Those 250-meter-long giant cannons with 460mm caliber main cannons were terrifying enough to scare people to death. The Storm Guardians had inherited the ferocious habit of the Mountain Knights during the Torrential Fortress era. They fought without any regard for their lives. Once they went up, they couldn't hope to come back. Either they completely destroyed their opponents, or they were completely destroyed. The Dalijan didn't play with technology. In the end, the Gilnea's Air Force was chosen just like that. In order to keep it a secret, the higher-ups didn't reveal that they were going to fake their defeat. Who knew that ever since they returned to the Alliance, the Gilneas would recover from the destruction brought about by the cataclysm? They were also full of energy to prove themselves. Under the supervision of the old alpha wolf, Jean, the Gilnea's soldiers trained hard. As soon as the battle started, a volley of main cannons blasted 1/6 of the opponent's airship down. This was because the Gilneas didn't have money. Live ammunition was still rare, and they could only use the expired cannonballs produced by the Alliance to test fire. In the end, they only had a 23.6% hit rate for the target from 3,000 meters away. Otherwise, the wooden-hulled warships at the back would really be no match for the Alliance. What the hell was the opponent? The fleet didn't have the upper hand, and less than half of the cannons used TNT gunpowder. Many of the cannons didn't even have the brakes installed properly. When they fired, the deck of their own ship caved in. Chapter 1918. In the surveillance footage, Taylor actually saw old-fashioned black gunpowder cannons. What kind of cannon were they? Did they pull them out from a museum to make a joke? 3,000 meters. Sorry, it wasn't even the farthest range in theory. Quiet. Very quiet. After a short silence, every cannon position and bridge in the entire Alliance fleet burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. This is the main fleet of the Horde? Could it be a joke sent by the Horde circus? Actually, it was really difficult for the Horde. Brain-dead Howl knew nothing about flying warships. Garavex had no choice but to pull out a bunch of antiques to make up the numbers. Anyway, he had swindled them back, and they didn't cost him anything. The pilots were also unlucky people from the Alliance or mercenaries that he had gotten back through various means, such as lending money. Among the 666 warships, only 80 of them were newer diesel-powered flying warships. The rest were old steam-powered warships with wooden shells and thin iron sheets. As for training, it was even more tragic. The hit rate of the cannons at a distance of 5,000 meters was only 0.3%. The warships of the Gilneas weren't second-hand goods. They were the lowest-grade flying ships of the Alliance. Other than the 3 battleships, the entire fleet was made up of Cleveland-class cruisers and Benson-class destroyers. Cruisers and destroyers of this design were famous for being able to take a beating. There were many places that were hit by the cannons, but the losses weren't great. The casualties on each ship were in the single digits. Taylor broke out in a cold sweat. How could they still lose like this? General Taylor couldn't care less about his moral integrity anymore. He directly exercised the authority that William had given him and cursed in the secret communication circuit. Idiot. Why do you think it's so easy? The secret order that Commander Rin gave me is to lose. When the other side fires another round of cannons, I don't care how you do it. Set them on fire and make it look like a sacrificial explosion. But you can't really destroy the ships. Otherwise, I'll kill you bastards later. F***CK. This operation was simply amazing. If the captains of each ship hadn't heard Taylor's familiar roar, they would have thought that Taylor was giving fake orders. Actually, none of the captains were idiots. They had been wondering all along. Why did the Alliance have so many elite soldiers? Why did it have to be their turn to fight? If it was just a training exercise, they could just charge over directly. Although there was a unified command in the Alliance, everyone knew that the Air Force was basically formed independently. The dwarves and gnomes were the strongest in the air. The Zap Thrower fleet that they formed had blinded the entire army during the Alliance's military exercise in the Twilight Highlands last year with a hit rate of 41.3% from 5,000 meters away. Then there was Stormwind's 7th Fleet and Kultiraz's Ice Queen fleet. The two were basically equal. The third tier was Lordaeron and Alterac. The fourth tier consisted of small countries like Stromgard and Gilneas. If the Alliance wanted to feign defeat, then it made sense. The Alliance had recently transferred many troops into Theramore, but none of them were the main force. Apart from a small number of Alliance soldiers, most of them were mercenaries hired from the Hot Sand Group, a total of 150,000 people. Speaking of which, when did the Alliance become so weak that they had to rely on mercenaries to defend their cities? Even those Alliance soldiers looked like small town guards from some remote corner of the world. Their discipline was lax and they did not behave properly. They were clearly ruffians. Now, the bad thing was that his Gilness flying fleet was too outstanding. Thus, the entire fleet was in an uproar. F***CK. So the higher-ups wanted us to feign defeat. Quick, take out the blankets for sleeping. After the next round of bombardment, immediately set the blankets on fire. Aren't there still samples of gunpowder in the warehouse? Get ready. After the next round of bombardment, throw it at the thickest part of the deck and blow it up. Prepare to set it on fire. Tell those idiots to be careful and not burn themselves. Cannoneers, pay attention. Use your damn cannons. Those who are not confident, shoot the cannonballs into the sea. A few minutes later, when the Horde fleet approached the Alliance fleet at high speed under the pressure of their commander and opened fire again, they suddenly realized that everything had changed. It was as if the Alliance fleet did not know how to fight anymore. The cannons rumbled, and only a few Horde airships were actually hit. Although one shot would cause them to explode, turning them into garbage falling from the sky and into the sea. The scene was terrifying, but the losses were acceptable. On the Alliance side, dozens of warships shot out fireballs. The raging fire could not be hidden from anyone. The happiest thing was that one of the Alliance's main warships that was at least 200 meters long exploded violently. The black pillar of smoke that shot into the sky caused the entire Horde fleet to rejoice. Ha ha ha. We hit it. Did we hit the ammunition compartment and cause it to explode? Most likely. On the bridge of the Horde fleet, the Gnomes and the Forsaken cheered together. On the Alliance side, General Taylor was suspicious. Hey. Fuse. Did something really happen to them? The burly man called Fuse laughed foolishly in the video. It's fine. The lads have been complaining about the previous generation of reconnaissance planes on our new warships, so we blew up the auspicious cloud. Anyway, our bulletproof cabin is pretty good, isn't it? Make it more realistic. That's what you asked for. F***CK. General Taylor's face darkened. He blew up a plane that he looked down on. What kind of sh**T was that? After hanging up, Fuse changed his expression and said, "You little bastards, you can't blow up the cannon even if you don't want to use the old 356mm main cannon. Isn't it easy to change the cannon turrets? We are envious of the 460mm main cannon of Alterac. Our ship's hull can take it too. At least change to a 400mm main cannon." It was damaged on duty anyway. The Alliance would reimburse it. Soon, Fuse controlled the battleship, Maersk, to perform a thrilling crash. The left rudder was 15 degrees, the right rudder was 31 degrees. It dragged a long trail of black smoke as it swayed and crashed into the Theramore military port diagonally behind. It landed steadily on the dock. Then, the veterans on the ship started to play mahjong. This battle was named the Battle of Theramore. The Horde lost 437 warships, and the Alliance lost more than half of their warships. On the surface, there were 132 warships, but in reality, there were no warships that crashed, and 81 casualties. After weakening the Alliance's air force, the Horde finally used their ultimate weapon 3 days later. It was a desperate charge by hundreds of flying warships, all for the sake of covering a warship that was concealed by wind magic and illusions in the sky. On that battleship, a magic bomb that shocked both the Alliance and the Horde was dropped, focusing Rainbow. Chapter 1919. Emergency Broadcast. Emergency Broadcast. Just 10 minutes ago, the cruel and bloody horde used weapons of mass destruction to launch an inhumane and destructive attack on the Alliance's Theramore harbor on the Kalandor continent. In every capital, every town, every military camp, and every magic mirror, the familiar official broadcaster of the Alliance, Sally Whitemane, appeared in front of everyone. With Sally's promotion to one of the bishops of the Church of Holy Light, she rarely appeared in such broadcasts. Only extremely important events required Sally to appear in person. In a sense, she was already one of the symbols of the Alliance. The last time she appeared, it was to announce that Duque was temporarily stepping down from his position as the supreme commander of the Alliance to pursue the path of a true god. This time, she announced the bad news of Theramore's destruction in a vivid voice. 200,000 troops, annihilated in an instant. Theramore's defending general, Lieutenant General Grunt Macedon, died in the line of duty. On the screen, under the crushing of the huge blue and purple light, Jaina's mage tower bore the brunt of it. She stepped on the brilliant white glow, trying to resist the dazzling light that fell from the sky. Unfortunately, the mage tower failed and collapsed into dozens of pieces on the spot. The magnificent outer walls of the mage tower were like leaves blown away in a storm, exploding everywhere. The towering walls of Theramore were like castles made of sand on a beach, crushed into powder in the blink of an eye. Countless tanks and cannons were suddenly kneaded like dough, twisted and deformed under the huge explosion. The soldiers who fled in panic, crying and in despair, the lucky ones directly turned into ashes, while the unlucky ones on the periphery became human-shaped torches, struggling for more than 10 seconds before dying in screams. Every Alliance member was so shocked that they couldn't say a word. From New Silvermoon City to Lordaeron City to Iron Furnace Fort to Stormwind City, every member of the Alliance who witnessed this scene was silent. If they didn't perish in silence, they would explode in silence. The Alliance. Since its establishment, it had never surrendered to any organization. No one would forget that the Alliance was established to resist the vicious and cruel old horde. After 10 seconds of silence, the soldiers and citizens of the Alliance erupted with the greatest anger they had ever experienced. Punish the murderers. They wanted to kill us all 30 years ago. They should have destroyed the horde long ago. War. We need an all-out war. Destroy this cruel race. Counterattack. Where is our fleet? Where are our soldiers? Kill the orcs. Kill. 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 The emotions of the crowd were surging. After receiving the news, the Alliance reacted intensely. Tens of millions of people surged onto the streets. They held all sorts of banners and shouted angrily, scolding the Alliance higher-ups for not doing anything. An hour later, the throne meeting in Stormwind City's Storm Fortress was silent. The magic mirror was full of angry crowds from all over the world. In the middle of the throne room, there was a large pile of letters requesting for battle. The speed at which the number of letters was increasing exponentially, and the herald was simply too busy to deal with them. Tyrion Fordring was the first to speak, his face livid. After being told of Ceremos's plan, he was the angriest. This is too despicable. What is this? This was what Duque used to call entrapment enforcement. I've seen the most cunning humans, but I've also seen the most just orcs. I didn't expect that the most cunning human to be my colleague for almost 30 years. Tyrion roared and waved his fist. In the end, he didn't hide the fact that he had given the mass-produced focusing rainbow to the horde from the higher-ups. Jaina said coldly, Tyrion, you can't deny it. Even if we let Garush steal the focusing rainbow, Garush would still be the one to carry out the plan. If he was a good person, he could have used these things as bargaining chips instead of throwing them directly into the Alliance's cities. But Tyrion still wanted to say something. William slapped the armrest. Enough. The just orc Eitrig you speak of has already been killed by that brainless lunatic Garush as a traitor. Even his head has been hanging at the gates of Orgrimmar for a whole week. Believe it or not, even if you gave that brainless fool a loaded gun to his head to win his trust, he wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger. In this life, the incident of letting the veteran orc Eitrig go did not happen to Tyrion. But fate was wonderful. Later, the two of them got to know each other through the cooperation between the Alliance and the Horde. Tyrion respected Eitrig's character. Tyrion was silent for a moment. Both Jaina and William had an unforgettable hatred for the orcs. Under Duque's suppression, being able to endure until now was already a sign of maturity. Tyrion was still a little unwilling. But, there's still Thrall. Thrall isn't the chief now. Muradin said coldly. That brainless fool has been in charge of the Horde for almost 4 years. Thrall didn't even fart when he came back. Aurelia also spoke up. The Burning Legion will come again. We don't have much time. This is the last chance to get rid of the Horde and prevent the Horde from dragging us down again. Irian said, the orcs are a barbarian race that can't coexist peacefully. As long as someone provokes them, or a fighter comes to power, they will become extremely aggressive. The Draenei race was almost wiped out here. The human race was almost wiped out here as well. Do you want to wait for the Horde to become strong one day and slaughter all the races of the Alliance before you are satisfied? The topic had unknowingly reached the height of the race. Tyrion was a nobleman and not a racist, but in the face of such a big issue, he could only remain silent. William made a decision. In the name of the acting commander-in-chief of the Alliance, I announce that in the name of the Alliance's acting commander-in-chief, a throne vote will be held on the motion of launching an all-out war against the Horde to destroy all the tribes and leave no survivors. As usual, the minority obeys the majority. Affiliated organizations of the Alliance, such as the Silver Hand, the Silver Dawn, the Naga, and the Murlocs, did not have the right to vote. There was no suspense or surprise, it was passed unanimously. Even Queen Kalia, whom Tyrion respected the most, voted in favor of it without hesitation. At this moment, Tyrion's eyes dimmed. Of course, he knew that this meant that the 2 million orcs were finished. Jaina couldn't bear to see the noble paladin so discouraged, so she added. The Alliance is not a butcher organization. What we want to destroy is only hostile organizations that are harmful to the world and the Alliance. We have never said that we want to exterminate a race. Look, even the Kiraj insect people and the Naga tribe, who were once hostile to the Alliance, are now sitting in the Alliance's gallery. In the future, as long as they make enough contributions, the Alliance will also promote their status. Chapter 1920. What else could Tyrion say? He could only nod dejectedly. In his mind, most of the members of the tribe had been deceived by Gurus, and did not deserve to die. This was the difference between the minds of the clergy and most of the rulers. It had to be admitted that the High Pure who believed in the Holy Light could not represent everyone. In this world, the evil and the good were the minority. Perhaps some people admired the holiness of the High Pure and envied the freedom of the great Demon King, but not many could do that. After all, the world was ruled by mortals. This was also the reason why most religious armed forces did not have a good ending, both in ancient and modern times. Either the royal power overrode the divine power, and the divine power became an ornament. Or the divine power controlled the royal power, and the royal power always secretly resisted. The decision of the throne conference was made public 6 hours after Theramore was destroyed by the magic bomb. In the magic mirror, Sally Whitemane's pretty face was full of frost as she sat upright. A few days ago, the Alliance launched the war in advance without a declaration of war. At first, the Alliance showed restraint, hoping to confirm through diplomatic channels whether this was an individual act or an all-out war initiated by the tribe. However, the great chief of the tribe, Gurus Hellscream, firmly ignored it. 6 hours ago, the tribe used the treasure, Focusing Rainbow, stolen from the Blue Dragon army to create a terrible magic bomb and used the cruelest method to destroy the Alliance's commercial port, Theramore, on the Kalimdor continent. It was originally used for trading with the tribe. 30 years ago, millions of orcs launched the first war of the Dark Portal and destroyed all of Stormwind. The second war of the Dark Portal swept through the entire Eastern Kingdom. Nearly 10 countries were captured and their territories were ravaged. Tens of millions of people were killed or injured, and tens of millions were displaced. At this time, the middle-aged and old people listening in front of the magic mirror, no matter men or women, unconsciously clenched their teeth and fists. 5 years after the War of the Dark Portal, Zul, as the great chief of the tribe, once again led the tribe through the Dark Portal. They were all wiped out by the brave soldiers of the watchtower near the Dark Portal. Even though the old Rotterdam kingdom once turned more than 100,000 orcs into slaves, and used the uncivilized method of slavery to dominate the orcs, that was not enough for the orcs to shout, "Orcs will never be slaves," and glorify themselves as victims. Under the threat of the Scourge army, who was the enemy of all living beings, the Alliance commander at that time, Duke Marcus, gave up on hunting down the orcs with the utmost kindness. He put aside his past grudges and joined forces to deal with the Scourge army. We even lent them ships to cross the endless sea and reach the new continent, Kalimdor, to start a new life. Speaking up to hear, Sally's tone suddenly became stern, her beautiful eyebrows raised coldly. But how did the tribe treat our alliance? The horde trampled on the goodwill of the alliance with the greatest cruelty. Their target was very clear. They wanted to be like their fathers and start a war to wipe out the alliance. They want to destroy our civilization and kill all humans, dwarves, gnomes, blood elves, night elves, Drenii, Naga, Kiraji insect people, Murlocs and other vassal races. Unknowingly, all the people of the alliance started to show their veins and gnash their teeth. All the leaders of the alliance, after an emergency discussion at the Throne Conference, finally unanimously passed the resolution of waging a full-scale war against the horde. All active soldiers and reservists who are on leave are to immediately cancel their leave and report to the nearest military station. The Alliance has officially expanded the scope of reservists and plans to recruit 3 million reservists. At the same time, all adult men above the age of 16 and below the age of 50 must undergo military training 3 times a week, each time not less than 2 hours. Girls of the same age who voluntarily accept military training will receive special subsidies from the Alliance. For details, please consult the local Civil Affairs Department. There were still many announcements from the Alliance. For most of the people, the previous ones were already enough. There were originally less than a third of the rational and wait-and-see factions, but this time, it was completely ignited. Because this was a huge explosion of new and old hatred. When the news spread, it was already past 5 in the evening. The recruitment offices of the Alliance, which were already bustling with noise, suddenly exploded. In Stormwind, the recruitment offices of small cities like Goldflash City and East Valley Lumberyard, which were now upgraded to small cities, the lines of people were as long as 500 meters. And in places like Stormwind City, Rapids Fort, Alterac, Silvermoon City, and Iron Furnace Fort, which had been ravaged by the orcs in the past, it was even more exaggerated. 5 lines of people lined up 5 kilometers away. Just like that, the lines of people occupied the streets and alleys of such a large city. Even though it had clearly affected many shops and pedestrians, everyone was extremely understanding. Because every pair of eyes was bright and full of vigor, with the blazing flames of revenge. They were silent. No one made any noise. At most, they would do their best to lower their voices and whisper. They all knew how their current comfortable life came about. They also knew that the Alliance army did not want unorganized and undisciplined hooligans. Every young man displayed their firm will to the world with such a face. Among the people in the queue, there was no lack of middle-aged men with gray temples. They stood straighter and straighter than those young men. With one look, it was obvious that they were once retired soldiers. The tribal invasion in the first year of the Dark Portal had caused the deaths of tens of millions of humans, dwarves, and elves. The pain of the previous generation was still imprinted in the deepest depths of the souls of the older generation. Silence did not mean that they were forgotten. Even for the shortest-lived humans, 25 years was not enough for this group of people to all grow old and die. The soldiers who had fought on the front lines 29 years ago had now become the pillars of the entire alliance. Those who still remained in the Alliance army were at least colonels. Those who left the Alliance army, under the military conversion system set up by Duque, received almost free decommissioned ships, and often had a higher starting point than others. For example, retired colonels and lieutenants could receive different grades of ships according to their military ranks for traveling business without mortgage. At the same time, the ship could be repaid interest-free in installments ranging from 5 to 10 years. In addition, there was also insurance. If the ship really sank in an accident, there was no need to pay. And the veterans who were disabled in the war also received enough social security. They would be assigned to various places. They would either be taught knowledge and culture and then join the civil affairs department or become a local patrol. Children who lost their fathers or even their mothers in the war would receive a high monthly subsidy that was enough for their daily needs. Chapter 1921. Orphans would be placed in foster care with qualified families, usually military families, according to the War Orphan Act signed by Duque until they were 16 years old. All living expenses and tuition fees were free. Families that adopted war orphans would also have special allowances. There were civil officials who were also veterans who would check on the orphans' growth monthly. It was precisely because they had experienced similar situations around them that those veterans absolutely could not tolerate the abuse of war orphans. In addition, the alliance would impose the most severe sanctions on corruption and embezzlement of pensions. The alliance's reputation in this regard was supreme. Alliance soldiers were blessed and treated well, even after retirement. This made joining the army the top choice for the youth of the alliance. Not to mention that the alliance had a righteous cause in every war. In addition, after the attack on Northrend, the expansion of territory and the increase in resources, all of which were preferential to the military. This made everyone in the alliance proud to join the army. If it wasn't for Duque strictly controlling the number of people joining the army over the years, the total number of active soldiers in the alliance would have already exceeded 10 million. Soldiers didn't do production. They were purely professionals who needed to be supported by money from other places. The peasant soldiers in the Middle Ages of Europe on Earth had been proven to be useless countless times. A few well-trained knights were able to chase thousands of peasant soldiers around like ducks in a rout. Unless it was on the verge of extinction, no matter how harsh the war was, the proportion of professional soldiers shouldn't exceed 1/10 of the total population. Generally speaking, 1% was the most appropriate proportion. In modern times, there were very few countries with more than 5 million regular troops. Even if there were more than 1 billion people in the Great Celestial Empire, the number of soldiers was still in the millions. As for the militia and reserve soldiers who had received military training but didn't need to pay for the army, that was another matter. Duque used this method to avoid the huge burden of unlimited military expenditure and set up a conscription echelon for the alliance. Once there weren't enough active soldiers, there would immediately be strictly trained reserve soldiers to replace them. The only difference between them and the active soldiers was often combat experience. In fact, many of them were generals who had been transferred from active duty to reserve duty, so even this could be saved. Under the reserve duty, there were also tens of millions of people who had received basic combat training. The series of measures had been carried out for more than a decade. Once the alliance entered a state of war, the energy released by this war machine would immediately become quite terrifying. Even the leaders of the Throne Conference were shocked by this scene. Not to mention Sal. Thrall, who had been hiding in the Ring of Earth for the past few years, was the last to know about this. When he received the news from the Night Elf Druid from the Alliance, it was already the evening of the second day. Sal, who was greatly shocked, immediately persuaded Hamuel Rune Totem to help him ask Malfurion to intercede. The great druid was a complete nature protector. At the same time, he represented the Cenarian Circle and listened to the throne meeting. Malfurion was not surprised by Sal's arrival, but he was not tempted by Sal's proposal to stop the war between the Alliance and the Horde. Sal, I acknowledge your and the Tauren's efforts in healing the scars of the Earth. In fact, the people of the Earth Ring were equal to the siblings of the Cenarian Circle. However, I suggest that you stay out of this matter. But before Sal could finish, he was interrupted by Malfurion. No need for buts. You were the one who gave up the position of Great Chief to Garush. Now he is acting. He is using the power of the Great Chief to let Varrock Seraphar attack Grey Valley. The first thing they did when they attacked was to set fire. Now 1/5 of Grey Valley is in a forest fire. And he destroyed Theramore with Focusing Rainbow. This is beyond the scope of a conventional war. Even if Garush steps down, he will not be spared. Malfurion said very straightforwardly what many politicians would not say in public. He was a leader and a great druid with a merciful heart. This was the biggest reason why Sal could hear the truth. Sal felt like the sky was falling. As a former great chief, he was the orc who knew the strength of the Alliance best. When the Alliance's war machine started, it could crush the Horde in minutes. Sal walked away in a daze, muttering to himself, that idiot Garush actually gave the Alliance such an excuse for war. Sal hurriedly used the portal in Darnassus and immediately rushed to the political center of the Alliance, Stormwind City, where the Alliance commander Varian Rin was. He was splashed with cold water. Commander Rin knows of your arrival. He refuses to meet you. But as an old friend of the Alliance, the commander believes that it is necessary to protect your personal safety in the Alliance. He will send a team of guards for you. Sal wanted to say that he did not need guards, but he saw the eyes of the soldiers and the people. Even if he wore the badge of a diplomatic envoy, in theory, the Alliance would not attack him. But those pairs of eyes full of hatred and hostility made his heart palpitate. He had no doubt that if he dared to take off the badge, even if they knew that they were no match for him, the entire Stormwind City would launch a suicidal attack on him. Sal turned to look for Jaina in the new city of Kultiras, south of Stranglethorn Vale. Unsurprisingly, Jaina did not meet him. She only asked Egwene to bring a message to Sal. This is the second time. There will never be a third time. Strictly speaking, the Horde had declared war on the Alliance twice in this life. Unlike in history, where there were no foreign enemies, they would stab each other, and when there were foreign enemies, they would join forces. In this life, the war between the two sides was more cautious. Either they did not fight, or they fought a real full-scale war. Sal was very depressed. The Alliance still respected him, but the leaders of the Alliance also had a reason not to see him. Sal was not qualified. Sal was no longer a great chief, not even a chief or the absolute leader of a large organization. The attitude of Varian and Jaina was the attitude of the entire Alliance Throne Council. The two deputy commanders who were the leaders refused to see him, and as long as they were mature politicians, they would never contact Sal in private. After all, Sal was still a green-skinned orc. Sal was a little disappointed, but not desperate. He used the Alliance portal and went directly to Hagaro Island in Stranglethorn Vale to find Wajin. Chapter 1922. Woken seemed to be in good spirits. Sal noticed that Woken was still in the mood to carve his fangs. Old friend, I'm so happy to see you in good spirits. Me too. Woken gave Sal an affectionate hug. Sal went straight to the point and said, we can't let the war between the Horde and the Alliance break out. I'm going to start the Makora and challenge Garush. I had to stop Garush before he made a bigger mistake. I hope you can come back and help me after I take charge of the Horde again. To Sal's surprise, Woken didn't agree immediately. Instead, he showed a sad expression. Sal, times have changed. Woken, Sal, have you seriously looked at the cities of the Alliance? Sal was shocked and didn't know what to say. After a long time, he replied in a deep voice, I have. But I was too anxious this time and didn't look carefully. Woken asked, have you seen the Alliance 15 years ago? Or the Alliance today? Even if you take back the throne of the Great Chief, can you stop 2 million orcs who are eager to fight, expand their territory, and get more resources? Sal's heart beat violently. He realized what Woken wanted to say. He was still unwilling to give up. He gritted his teeth, looked up, and stared at Woken. It was my mistake to give the position of Great Chief to Garush. Now that he is leading the Horde to the edge of a dangerous cliff, I can't make the same mistake again. Woken didn't answer directly. Instead, he continued to speak. The Alliance is very good to the Darkspear Trolls. They also promised that as long as the Darkspear Trolls want to leave, they can go anywhere outside the Alliance's territory at any time. Generally speaking, the Darkspear Trolls are not allowed to leave their territory, but I applied to visit the Alliance, and William approved. He sent paladins to protect me, just to prevent the aggressive blood elves from attacking me. In the past 3 years, I have been to many places in the Alliance. That is a treatment that I have never enjoyed as a chief of a backward civilization, as a Horde person. I went to the Alliance's Stormwind City, to the Iron Furnace Fort, and other than the unpopular Silvermoon City, I have been to all the Alliance's main cities and over 100 Alliance towns. I have come to a conclusion. The Alliance has completely pulled away from the Horde. When tribal warriors were still using iron axes and wearing iron armor, a 12-year-old human boy had already learned how to use a rifle in the military training that was popularized in both urban and rural areas. He shot an orc silhouette target in the chest from 30 meters away. Even a small village with only 500 people has 3 well-maintained steam tanks as local armed forces. Even the patrolling militias are professionals. If I take the Alliance's airship, I can travel 600 kilometers in a day and a night. As for the cost, it was only the price that a farmer could earn after working for 3 days. On the spaceship, I saw the most ordinary farmers, but also the most luxuriously dressed upper-class people. The only people who are privileged are the soldiers. Although I haven't seen any soldiers who abuse their privileges, the people respect them from the bottom of their hearts. Sal, you and Duque went on stage at the same time. It took you almost 10 years to win a vast territory for the Horde, but you couldn't sublimate the orcs or even the entire Horde from the simple Iron Age to a stronger, civilized race. It took Duque the same time, but he has evolved the Alliance into a powerful civilization that has separated itself from the Earth. Will such a powerful alliance allow the backward Horde to continue to exist and continue to occupy vast territories and resources? No. It won't. It's like we can't allow the barbaric centaurs to continue to exist in Duroder. It's like we can't stand the boars continuing to occupy the barren land. The Alliance and the Horde will eventually fight. This time, it's just that your choice of Garush gave the Alliance a huge excuse. Even if you take action against Garush and overthrow him before the Alliance, so what? Do you think Duke Marcus is a true saint? At this point, Woking opened his arms and raised them diagonally to the sky. He opened his mouth wide and let out a roar that deeply shocked Sal's heart. Don't get it wrong. He's a Stormwind person. The people of Stormwind were the ones who suffered the most from the orcs. Go and ask Orgrim. When the orcs swept through the elven forest in Stormwind, what did the orcs do? They robbed all the human villages and even refused the humans' pleas for mercy and surrender. They killed all the humans regardless of gender or age, just like they did to the Draenei. When Stormwind counterattacked the elven forest, there were no captives either. The ones you rescued from Goldenhold Castle were all captives of another army, the Lordaeron people. Duke Marcus is a Stormwind person. The current leader of the Alliance, Varian Rin, is the king of Stormwind. He saw his father killed by an orc assassin with his own eyes. Tell me, Sal. If there's a chance. Will they let the Horde go just like that? Now the Alliance has no foreign enemies. They have no scruples. This is the best time for the Alliance to destroy the Horde. Do you understand what I'm saying? Sal, Woken grabbed Sal's arms, which were thicker than his own, and shook Sal, who was already a little scared out of his wits. Sal was dazed for a moment. He seemed to see millions of orcs being slaughtered. Everything that the orcs' fathers had done to the Alliance would be reversed. He shuddered, and he could feel the cold sweat on his back soaking through his clothes. Call the orcs to resist to the end? Would that be useful? From the ground to the air, and then to the sea, the form of war had changed dramatically. A hot-blooded and brainless charge would only lead to inevitable death. Even if professionals could withstand bullets, could they withstand cannonballs? The top professionals could even use cannonballs as a kind of flying equipment. How many professionals of this level were there? Most of the races were composed of mortals. The Horde attached great importance to the cultivation of professionals, but it was only at the level of 1 in 10 mortals. Among this group of professionals, more than 90% were low-level professionals who could not withstand guns and cannons with their bodies. The group of professionals was like a pyramid. The more powerful the profession, the fewer the number. If the alliance gained an absolute advantage in the mortal realm and slaughtered the mortal soldiers of the horde, then only a small group of high-end professionals would not be able to make any waves. If they fought the alliance to the end, there was no doubt that they would be completely destroyed. Sal suddenly fell into a painful dilemma. Chapter 1923. No matter what choice Thrall made. Once the war machine was started, it would be like a rolling wheel of history. It would never stop until it crushed something important. The funny thing was that after Brainless Roar blew up Theramore, his whole body suddenly swelled up and floated. Ha ha ha. Well done. Anastrian, as long as you blow up Naxxramas and Dalajan of the Alliance. Then blow up the hateful Stormwind City, Iron Stove Fort, Lordaeron City, and Darnassus. The Alliance will be finished. Brainless Roar patted the Sun King's shoulder hard. Please forgive me for being blunt, but the Alliance has more powerful cities than these. I carefully examined the power. 1. Focusing Rainbow is only enough to destroy a relatively small city like Theramore. If it was a big city like Stormwind City, we would need at least 3. The Sun King was also telling the truth. Then let's get more, Focusing Rainbow. His words made the eyes of the people around him twitch. Was Focusing Rainbow so easy to get? If the Dragon Sleep Temple found out that the tribe had stolen this batch of Focusing Rainbow, then it would be big trouble. Although the dragons had experienced many disasters, the Dragon Sleep Temple still had at least the combat power of over 10,000 adult dragons. If the dragons came out in full force and attacked the tribe's current air force would never be able to hold them off. Magatha Grim Totem also said, "We can confuse the Alliance's vision and tell them that we have at least 1,000 of these magic bombs. We can use this to threaten the Alliance to admit defeat, issue a surrender declaration, and cede all the land on the Kalimdor continent to our tribe." This cow's words had to be said, quite the essence of a terrorist. It was just that she didn't know 2 things. First, any mature securities would not compromise with terrorists, at least not publicly. Second, Focusing Rainbow was a disguised gift from the Alliance to the tribe to play. At this time, the messenger suddenly asked for an audience and shouted as soon as he came in, "Not good, the Alliance is attacking. They have launched an attack on all of our territories." Gurus was displeased. Bullsh *T. I don't want general terms like all. Don't tell me that the Alliance has the ability to attack every one of our settlements. Of course, the messenger knew that his boss was an impatient person. He was also afraid that his boss would beat the *T out of him, so he immediately opened the report. Written on it were the names of the towns and troops that had been attacked. This included all the tribe's armies and the towns controlled by the tribes. On the northern front, the northern army led by Varrock Salufar was besieged by the allied forces of the Night Elves and humans. The Alliance fleet from the hinterlands began to clear the area. Tens of thousands of tons of explosives bombarded Varrock's army again and again. In order to reduce the obstacles, Varrock followed Garusha's orders and set fire to the forest, which in turn became a death knell for the horde. The 460mm super large caliber naval cannon fired at close range at a distance of 3 kilometers from the tribe. A single cannonball with a 660-pound, 300 kilograms, charge would be enough to kill all humans and animals within a 50-meter radius. Those who were further away were bleeding from their ears, nose, and eyes. If they didn't die, they would be crippled. Later, the Alliance found that large-caliber artillery shells were too wasteful, so they switched to flying destroyers to provide cover and used bombers that looked like big-bellied fish to carry out carpet bombing. It was not that the horde did not try to fight back, but unfortunately, the few wooden flying warships and wyverns arrived late. Soon after they arrived in the combat airspace, they were shot by the Alliance's destroyers, exploding into fireballs and dirty flesh falling from the sky. The Alliance directly used the cruel reality to teach the horde a lesson. In modern warfare, there was no initiative without air superiority. An army of 300,000 was reduced to ashes in a single morning. Only Varrock Salufar was spared. And this was because he had been hit by a large-caliber cannon, yet he was still alive. He was saved by the orcs who rushed over and sent away in advance. In the Stonetalan mountain, the well-prepared Galavix built his goblin base camp, the Rusty Water City, into the belly of the mountain. Unfortunately, he was prepared to deal with the Alliance's air attack. He did not realize that the Alliance was already ahead of the Horde in all aspects. In the dark Rusty Water City, the goblins suddenly heard a rumbling sound from the mountain wall. What's that sound? It seems to be coming from the underground. Soon, the Rusty Water goblins got the answer. That was the dozens of huge earth-drilling bugs that burst out from the depths of the ground, Oro's children. Oro's heirs, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws in a frightening manner, did not indulge in the thrill of slaughter. After breaking through the walls of this underground kingdom, they retreated. A few minutes later, tens of thousands of Karaji bugmen warriors drilled out of every dark hole. Of course, in the eyes of the goblins, they were aliens. The bugmen followed the orders of the Karaji twin emperors, who were resurrected by Duque before he left, and launched a devastating offensive against the Rusty Water goblins. At this moment, the Prince of Trade Galavix, who was in Orgrimmar, did not know about it until his nest was completely raided. He was distressed by the fact that his wealth was robbed and his slaves died. He fainted on the spot. On the western front, in the desolate land, the settlements and sentry posts of the Horde were all uprooted by air firepower. The Golans, who regarded this place as their territory, were very strong. Each Golan had the strength to fight with an adult dragon. The black dragon's corpse on the Blade Peak mountain in the outer realm was the masterpiece of their boss, Gruul. So what? The dragon breath of an adult dragon rarely had a range of more than 100 meters. Dragon breath was the longest range attack of most dragons. After all, dragons who were proficient in magic like Krasus were rare. In the face of a dragon's attack, Golans could throw a big stone and smash the dragon from the sky. But Golans had no way to deal with the Alliance fleet that directly fired from a height of 1,000 meters. Their huge size meant that it was difficult for them to find a cave to hide in. The Alliance gunner in the sky laughed. Ha ha ha. It's as easy as hunting. Stop talking nonsense, use armor-piercing bullets, don't use high-explosive bullets, and fight them like tanks. Golans, who once dominated a region, were harvested without any ability to resist. And their boss, Gruul, who was attacking the Feathermoon Fortress, encountered opponents of the same level for the first time, and there were 6 of them in one go. All of them were the famous gods of the wilderness in the history of Azeroth, the bear brothers Uzer and Yusak, the wolf king Goldrun, the crow god Iwina, the turtle god Tortola, and the demigod Cenarius. In front of them, the strong Gruul could only die with a grievance. Chapter 1924. In the city of New Kultiras in Hidden Treasure Bay, Jaina finished a hard day of work and returned to her mage tower. With a wave of her hand, she opened a magic mirror and said a sentence. Gruul is dead. Well, as expected. Jaina gently flipped her brilliant blonde hair, then deliberately squeezed her magic twin peaks. Duque, when are you coming back? What seemed like an understatement was a shocking fact. Yes. That's right. In the magic mirror, the person who was talking to Jaina was none other than Duke. Ahem. My good disciple, you're not being good. Let me tell you, flirt. Get F***ked. The master and disciple said the second half of the sentence at the same time. Jaina gave Duque a provocative look, wantonly showing off her beautiful curves in front of Duque. Then come back. I'm almost done here. I've collected about 3/4 of the timeline. I can use brute force to push the rest, but it's a bit rough. Withdrawing her smile, Jaina said seriously, Duque, we all miss you. Although everything is fine without you, it always feels like something is missing. Duque sighed. I'll try my best. If I'm fast, according to the time on your side, I'll be back in about a month. Just in time to finish. Well, this is the best news I've heard in 3 years. As a small reward, I'll give you a dance. Jaina's smiling face was charming. She raised her hand, and an ice pipe appeared out of thin air in the center of the image. Her elemental control was so pure that there were no edges or burrs on the pipe. It was like a smooth pipe that had been finely processed in a steel mill. Jaina danced around the pipe, making Duque's mouth dry. Humph. Little hussy, you're going to die. Duque made a declaration like a defeated dog. Humph. I'll be waiting. Jaina patted her perky buttocks in protest. Then the two turned off the communication. The war between the Alliance and the Horde was completely one-sided. Especially when Grol's huge head was hung on the bow of the Bismarck, it naturally caused panic in the tribe. Out of fear, a large number of tribesmen abandoned their homes and began a long journey towards the only safe place in their hearts, Orgrimmar. Why do I feel that Grol is very weak? William was a little puzzled during the throne conference. Jaina replied calmly, it's not that he's weak, it's that the entire world of Azeroth has become stronger. According to Duque, the world will have sensed the danger and started to release more of the planet's energy that we don't understand. This energy can unlock the shackles of our combat power, allowing the local powerhouses to advance to a higher level. Vashj continued, well, I was also curious at first. Why did Duque want me to swear allegiance to the planet and swear to become a demigod directly under the planet? Now that I know, I can feel my strength increasing every day, though very little. This is not the result of cultivation, it's purely a gift from the planet. William understood. Although Grol has the body of a demigod, he has always had no intention of serving Azeroth, so his strength has not increased. Yes. If Duque was here, he might say, Grol, you're a level 70 boss, and you still want to talk nonsense in a level 90 environment? You're already giving face by not finding someone to kill you alone. Don't you know how much you're worth? This, he really didn't. So Grol died. Yes, the people below asked, what should we do with the women and children who are trying to evacuate? Kalia asked. There was silence in the throne conference. It was William who spoke first. 25 years ago, our fathers didn't kill all these green-skinned bastards. That's the biggest mistake. Are we going to let these bastards live for another 15 years and declare war on the Alliance for the third time? Obviously, the violent side of him that he inherited from the wolf god Goldring had flared up. What he said was the truth, but it was against the teachings of the Holy Light. Jaina suddenly said, let them go to Orgrim. The Alliance is always an organization that fights against evil. There's no need to tarnish the glory of the Alliance on this matter. Moreover, a large number of refugees can easily destroy the fragile food reserves of the tribe. Wait. What if that brainless Garrosh orders the massacre of orc civilians, triggers an uprising, and then is overthrown? Won't this war be lost? Muradin muttered. The lifespan of dwarves was much longer than that of humans. 29 years was far from the next generation. Iron Furnace Castle and Loch Moden were the places that were the most severely ravaged by the orcs. For most dwarves, it was still fresh in their memories. The dwarves didn't want to stop the war. Don't worry. Jaina said confidently. Very soon, an opportunity will appear. Garrosh will definitely take the risk out of desperation. At this moment, Jurbin jumped up. Hey! Wait! It's not your style to speak like a charlatan. Lady Marcus. Normally, in Azeroth, the human custom was to follow her husband's surname when married. However, the status of the four queens was special, and Duque didn't care, so he was allowed to keep his surname. When the great craftsman Jurbin pointed out Jaina's surname, it was obvious that he was referring to Duque. Facing the passionate gazes of her sisters, Jaina couldn't resist and raised her hands in surrender. All right, I admit that I've contacted Duque. He'll be back soon, probably in a month's time. That's his arrangement. There was a burst of laughter in the throne room. Everyone was used to Duque being the boss. It wasn't that William wasn't good, it was just that there was a better and more perfect Duque, so why did they have to bow down to him? Moreover, the annihilation of the Horde was a big deal. No matter what, there should be a founder of the alliance like Duque. Now that there was news of Duque, everyone was naturally reassured. All right. We just have to do our own thing. Now, it's time to give Garush the last push. In Orgrimmar, Garush was about to go crazy. Having just destroyed Theramore, Garush felt that a small thing like the northern fortress wasn't worth his time, so he went back to Orgrimmar to oversee it. Who knew that as soon as he returned, he would receive an avalanche of emergency letters. Great Chief, there are already as many as 300,000 people gathered outside Durotar, or even more. The civil officials can't even count them. What should we do? What should we do? How would I know what to do? The Brainless roared. He was reckless and brainless, but at least he had some common sense and knew that the people had to eat. Where would Orgrimmar get the food to feed 300,000 mouths? Chapter 1925. Bastards. The tribe's territory is being invaded, and they fled without fighting. Are they still great tribal warriors? Brainless Roar lost his temper. In a sense, he was right. Adult female beast men were also brave warriors. Draka was also very good at fighting back then. But Great Chief, we've checked them. They are all pregnant or breastfeeding women, children less than 10 years old, and the elderly. Brainless Roar was speechless. According to the tribe's tradition, these people were not allowed to go to the battlefield. Otherwise, it would be blasphemy against the ancestors. But could he say the words of rejection? Chief, many of them are from our Warsong tribe, a guard whispered. Gurus felt extremely stifled. His raised arm finally lowered slowly. Let them into Durotar, but not Orgrimmar. In fact, this was a bit unnecessary. Everyone knew that Orgrimmar had no food. The key was to enter Durotar. A river of fury separated Durotar from the barren lands. After the cataclysm, the basin of the River of Fury formed to the west of Durotar, which was extremely rich in resources. The river washed down a large amount of fertile soil from upstream and deposited it in the basin. The plants here became lush, which indirectly led to more wild animals and magical beasts. However, the influx of refugees undoubtedly destroyed the ecological chain here, and all animals, big or small, were destroyed. The starving refugees did not care about the ecological chain. They were about to starve to death, so they slaughtered the animals here and ate them first. However, the collapse of the tribe continued. In just 3 days, the desolate land, Feralas, and Stoneclaw Mountain were declared to have fallen. Thunder Cliff was undefended. If the Alliance wanted to, they could completely destroy Thunder Cliff. In the primitive era of cold weapons, Thunder Cliff had excellent defense, but in the eyes of the Alliance's flying fleet, it was just a large target. The only reason why the fleet did not open fire was that the Alliance had issued a ban on cannons. For the first time, the Alliance sent out airborne troops without artillery support to fight against the Taurens under Magatha Grim Totem. The Silver Hand Knights led by Gavin Rad, plus the flying Sindorii Rangers with the support of wind elements, and Kudrin's Griffins, Thunder Cliff fell completely in just half a day. Even the Taurens hiding in the pillars of the Thunder Cliff were not spared. Magatha relied on the portal opened by the Sun King to barely escape. Brainless Roar was finally furious. He ordered the troops in the Barrenland's Great Rift Valley to defend the former Twilight Fortress. At the same time, he ordered the Sun King to launch a second round of destructive attacks. I don't care what you do, blow up Naxxramas. I know that thing is definitely on the way to Kalimdor. Brainless Roar gave an unreasonable order. Anastrian almost wanted to slap his staff in Garush's ugly face. Was it so easy to blow up the Alliance's stronghold? The painful lesson from last time had already proved that directly teleporting in would not work. Even though he was a demigod, he could not deal with it. With the Alliance's tight defense, sending a cannon fodder with focusing rainbow in would only be a waste of a precious magic bomb. As a last resort, the Sun King gritted his teeth and sneaked in personally. It couldn't be helped. He was no longer a king, and he wasn't even the leader of any organization. He was just a traitor who had once betrayed the tribe. Even if he didn't want to go, Garush would force him to prove his loyalty to the tribe. Garush did not guess wrong. Naxxramas was indeed heading from the blasted land to Kalimdor. It was almost at the center of the endless sea. The Emerald Dream had worn away the remnants of Zol's will, and even the power of the Crystal Skull had been mostly destroyed. Anastrian was no longer a demigod pharaoh. Now his strength had returned to Breaking Dawn. In exchange, he no longer had to suffer the mental torture of the Crystal Skull. He wanted to prove to the world that the Sun King was still powerful. In a bad situation, Garush did not fulfill his promise to help him take back the new Undercity. It was not that he did not want to, but that he could not. He knew that helping such a stupid chief might not end well. Since he had been stripped of the Sun Snatcher surname, his desire for power had grown. He used to be a king, and he could not accept that he would just leave the world stage in obscurity. Perhaps, this was his final struggle. Naxxramas' defense was very tight. Flying in the air, there were still 6 formations of more than 100 flying ships outside, from top to bottom, left to right, front to back, a total of 6 directions surrounding the fortress. This was not a problem for a Breaking Dawn wizard. There was no moon in the night. Under the cover of the night, he rode a bone griffin and easily approached the sky above Naxxramas. He wrapped himself in a cloud of black fog, and just like that, with the wind, he slowly floated to the huge fortress with Featherfall. Without much effort, he entered the fortress through a small open porthole. Normal people could not get in. He was a lich. Driven by the power of darkness, he could separate each of his bones, float them in mid-air, float them into the fortress one by one, and then reassemble them. The fortress was brightly lit, and people came and went. This was not a problem for Anastrian. He was very condescending to hide in one box after another, and let the logistics personnel transport them in. Without much effort, he read the minds of mortals and knew which box was sent into the core area of the fortress. However, he quickly realized that something was wrong. Not only was the surroundings too quiet, but 3 people with extremely strong elemental waves had suddenly appeared. Breaking Dawn? No. There was even a demigod. Anastrian, don't you want to know where you've exposed yourself? The Sun King was shocked. How could he forget this voice? It was him, using the tone of a lofty victor, who had stripped him of his Sunstrider surname. The voice of Kale, that Sunstrider. It was over. The Sun King tried and was shocked to find that the entire space had been sealed. Left with no choice, he slowly walked out of the box and rearranged his shrunken bones according to the distribution of human bones. In the empty hall, the 3 Pharaoh Jaina, Khadgar, and Kale, that stood there. This lineup was really magnificent. Hee hee, how did you find out? The Sun King deliberately used a teasing tone. What do you think? A charming voice that was not unfamiliar to Anastrian sounded behind him. His soul almost instantly collapsed. How could he not recognize this voice? The Eridar twins. It was because of their cooperation that he first betrayed Azeroth. Chapter 1926. Anastrian's soul trembled. At this moment, he finally understood why he had lost. Such a powerful high-tier demon lord was actually Duke's subordinate? When did you join Duke? He asked his last question, unwilling to give up. Guess. Gemini giggled. Her smile was like a flower, and it was as if she was watching the fruits she had planted ripened and could be harvested. It was a rather carefree feeling. Deep down, the sisters were still demons. It was just that the target they served was different. Having a master who bound them made them unhappy. Finding fun in their unhappiness, making someone who thought he was smart fall for his own cleverness and finally push himself into the abyss of despair was the greatest joy of this pair of female demons. Indignation. Indignation. Unwilling to leave the stage of history just like that, Anastrian roared and launched an attack. His target was Jaina. This was a very simple choice. He understood his son. Kale, that's cold gaze had already told him that his son had cut all ties with him. He was not afraid of Kale, that's anger. He was angry because he still cared. There was no joy or sorrow. This was truly treating him as an enemy. After Kale, that's became a demigod, his strength was even more shocking. He was directly connected to the land of flames and could infinitely extract fire elements. Just standing there gave Anastrian a great sense of pressure. As for Karthika, he was a special existence at the core of the magic net. He was not to be trifled with. To him, his only chance was with this Ice Queen. Ice dragons roar. The atmosphere trembled. Ice elements poured out. Responding to the Sun King's call, a sea of ice elements broke through the void, passing through elemental channels that were not under the control of the magic net and arriving in this area. Once all the ice elements appeared, they formed a magnificent and domineering ice dragon head under his will. That dragon head was based on the former blue dragon queen, Syndagosa. She opened her icy mouth and spat out a bone-chilling dragon breath at Jaina. With the weave becoming extremely widespread, Anastrian was one of the rare archmages who took a different path. He had no choice but to do this. If he also relied on the weave, he would be no different from a skeleton soldier once he clashed with an existence with higher authority in the weave. Low efficiency, but independence. Was it disdain? Was it admiration? Was it suspicion? Or arrogance? Other than Jaina herself, no one knew what the nasal laugh signified. The Sun King didn't know about Jaina's authority. Now he knew. Unfortunately, it was too late. As soon as it came out, it was a cold current of absolute zero. It wasn't as simple as covering the entire room. This vastness was enough to freeze the entire Naxxramas. Kaizi's long golden eyebrows twitched. From a demigod's point of view, this kind of elemental utilization was indeed inefficient and not aesthetically pleasing. However, Jaina was the person with the highest authority in the weave. She directly acted out the magical version of being rich and willful. Having more elements meant that she could do whatever she wanted. The other elemental channels were connected to the elemental world, or they could find a powerful elemental creature to sign a contract and borrow its power. Jaina, however, directly connected the elemental channel to the bottom of the tidal throne. What she drew was the world's purest frost element that obeyed her command. If the tidal throne master was someone else, he would probably have raged long ago. Who was the current leader of the water elemental world? Vashj. She had always considered herself a maid, but she was so close to Jaina that they could roll in the bed together with Duque. So what if it was a waste? I want to do whatever I want. When that unreasonable wave of frost element came crashing back, Anastrian finally realized that his era was over. Sigh. There was no anger, no resentment. There was only a sigh. Who would have thought that these would be his last words? Anastrian had dominated the northern continent for thousands of years, and was once hailed as a virtuous king. His last words were actually a sigh. The wave of frost element, which far exceeded what a breaking dawn mage could control, easily destroyed the Sun King's ice dragon breath, and completely froze the Sun King's body. The moment the frost covered Anastrian's body, the excessively pure elemental essence even attacked and ground at Anastrian's soul. Crack. A gust of wind blew past, and the great lich's body that had turned into an ice sculpture suddenly turned into ice dust, dissipating in the hall. A soul filled with a dark aura flew out at high speed. Unfortunately, this soul had just flown into the air when it was gently grabbed by a hand that reached out from the void. No matter how it dashed left and right, howled and twisted, it was unable to escape from that small space. For a moment, Kale, Bats and Khadgar bowed. The Eridar twins, who were standing in the corner of the hall to watch the show, knelt on the ground and lowered their once proud heads. Only Jaina's girlish heart was triggered. Almost like a hoof, she skipped over and shouted in pleasant surprise, "Duque, yes." It was Duque who had come. No one had expected Duque to rush back at this time. Liches were rather troublesome existences. If Duque had not made a move, it would have been up to the Eridar twins. With the twins' abilities, they were not afraid that the Sun King would escape, but some things were better left to Duque. Giving Jaina a one-handed hug, Duque did not even look at her. He looked at Kale. Is there anything else you want to say to him? If you find it hard to let go, the Alliance can announce to the public that he came to his senses at the last moment and was harmed by Gurus. This was a blatant falsification and a forced whitewash. Kale, that was very clear that as long as he accepted, Duque would help him settle the Windrunner family, and then make a huge reversal from top to bottom. For a moment, the excitement in his heart almost made him agree. After the excitement, what was left was a calm and indifferent heart. Phew, letting out a long breath, Kale, that smiled elegantly. Thank you for your concern, my lord. Actually, you have been very good to me. If it wasn't for you, I would probably have embarked on the tragic path of exile, or even fallen into evil. It was you who saved my soul, my subordinates, and my beloved people of Quell Dorii. You don't have to do much. I believe that history will give my father a fair evaluation. That's all. He spoke calmly and slowly turned around, representing the relief and freedom of the former elf prince. Duque sighed softly and slowly closed his palm. A powerful evil spirit was annihilated in his hands. Chapter 1927. Kale, had gone back to the Dalajan. This was his duty, and he had always been very loyal. Watching him disappear into the portal, Duque smirked. Idiot, history is written by the victors. With me as your boss, do you think I'll tie your dead father to the pillar of shame? Pfft. Jaina burst out laughing. Jaina didn't feel much, but Gemini, who was beside her, was already shivering. Khadgar even felt a strange tug in his soul. Duque, you have become a true god? Jaina asked hurriedly. Duque kissed Jaina and replied with a smile, it's not that simple. Even if I did, the ceremony would only be carried out in the main timeline. A small timeline can't support the advancement of a true god. However, if I don't go there, I won't know the greatness of Azeroth. There were many things that he could not say casually. After walking in the river of time, he finally understood. Although he still did not know why he had transmigrated to the world of Azeroth, one thing was certain, the world of Azeroth was a bit like breeding insects. It let the timelines that initially progressed at the same pace compete with each other. As time passed, the timelines that did not develop well and were destroyed by various situations were slowly eliminated. Instead, mysterious resources that mortals did not know were poured into the timelines that performed better. Slowly, that became the main timeline. Obviously, the timeline that he, Duque, was the one that stood out among the tens of thousands of timelines. Otherwise, how would he, Duque, have the right to cross over to other timelines to cause trouble? Azeroth originally had this intention, but he had pushed it along. He also seemed to want to observe Duque and see what he would do. Now, it seemed that the planet's will was very satisfied with him. Duque. Tell me quickly. Jaina was curious. As a mage, one of the most important characteristics was curiosity about the unknown. If she was not curious at all, she should be a strict accountant and not a mage. Got it. Duque waved his hand and dismissed his subordinates. Then, he opened a portal. With a single step, the two of them returned to Karazhan. Speaking of which, Duque, you're just in time. We had just started our attack on the tribe, and you came back. Duque smiled. I've been fighting with the tribe for 30 years. I can finally put an end to this grudge. No matter what, I shouldn't be absent at this final moment. Indeed, Duque had been through too much. From the time he had landed in the elven forest next to Stormwind City as a transmigrator, from the beginnings of a mere mage apprentice to his current position as a demigod. Fighting openly and covertly with the tribe was the main theme of Duque's growth. No matter what, he couldn't miss this final scene. There were some lines that he had laid for more than 10 years, and now it was time to pull in the net. While Duque chatted with Jaina about interesting things in other timelines, he secretly informed William, Muradin, and the other important leaders of the alliance. Yo! I'm back. Completely ignoring the switch of the magic communication, Duque's voice and appearance appeared directly in their minds, giving them a shock. What the hell? Don't scare me. William complained. F***CK. If you dare to scare me again, believe it or not, I'll blow up your Karazhan. The temporary dwarf king was very similar to his elder brother. They were as irritable as ever. Duque shrugged. No, I just wanted to say hello. Tell them that I'm back. Next, it's still up to you guys to do what needs to be done. I'll let Jaina do the actual work. You guys just have to cooperate. Damn it, I still want to take the credit of personally destroying the tribe. William pretended to be fierce. Come on, William. This is a grudge between the previous generation. We haven't all died yet, so there's no chance for a junior like you to step in. Muradin smiled slyly. This was the benefit of being a veteran. William was born at the wrong time. In terms of seniority, it really wasn't his turn to step in. TSK. William spat. After settling William, Jaina suddenly realized that Duque didn't contact his other women. He didn't even contact his other 2 wives. This shouldn't be. Duque, what the hell are you doing? Duque shrugged helplessly. It's hard for me too. It's all because our Queen Sylvanas went to spoil the history. At this moment, in New Silvermoon City, outside the bedroom of Queen Sylvanas, the Queen's royal guards stood up straight. Their spirits. It was clearly, our baby has a secret, but our baby won't say it. In the bedchamber, a massive condemnation conference was underway. Apart from Jaina, all the queens and female leaders of the alliance were gathered in the conference. Let me tell you guys. Duque is a big jerk. I've fought with him in thousands of timelines. Guess what? There isn't a person named Duke Marcus in any of the timelines. Queen Sylvanas was like a paparazzi, waving her fists and gritting her teeth. He was just an ordinary human back then. Maybe in other timelines, he didn't meet me and was killed by that wild boar. It was no secret in the harem that Aurelia met Duque for the first time. Queen Sylvanas was a little speechless. Kalia laughed. Did you find anyone with the surname Marcus like Duque? I did find one. I've seen him in many timelines, but that guy isn't Duque. Of course, he's very similar to Duque in terms of his lack of integrity. That guy doesn't even let off female dwarves. Pfft. The harem ladies all burst into laughter. Could it be that the incarnation of that guy in the main timeline is Duque? Tyrant asked as she burst into laughter. After hesitating for a long time, Queen Sylvanas shook her head. It's not him. Even their souls aren't the same type. Then what else is fun? Elucia asked. Boo-hoo. Big sister. Third sister. You've suffered a great loss. Queen Sylvanas fiercely revealed that Duque had cuckolded 2XX and Luo X in this timeline, taking Aurelia and Windsor for himself. Then, Queen Sylvanas revealed to Tyron that Duque had cuckolded Ma Triple X. Who knew? The 2 sisters laughed and said in unison, if I were to choose, I'd probably still choose Duque. Tyron held her face in her hands. Sigh. Perhaps this is what we call an ill-fated relationship. To be honest, with their relationship with Duke at this point, it was just a piece of gossip and a joke to them. Everyone knew that they could not leave Duque. Then, the topic changed. What about you? Kalia asked Queen Sylvanas. Queen Sylvanas was discouraged. Boo-hoo, I died a long time ago and became the terrifying Queen of the Forsaken. Chapter 1928. After Queen Sylvanas vividly described how terrible and ugly she had become, her skin was dull, and she was lifeless, the other women were curious. What about me? Elucia asked. Died, became a ghost, and wandered around the Scholomance Academy in Caer Daren. Woo! Women love to look beautiful. Hearing this news, Elusia howled dryly. What about me? Kalia asked weakly. I don't know, disappeared after the fall of Lordaeron. Sigh. The kind princess sighed. What about me, what about me? Hoof wagged her tail. I don't know, it seems that you haven't appeared yet. The black dragon princess pointed at herself. Queen Sylvanas bared her teeth. I was killed twice, once as a living dragon. The dragon's head was hung at the gate of Stormwind City. The other time was resurrected by Nethario, and I was defeated again. The black dragon princess was so desperate that she instantly turned into a corpse and did not want to move. Only Queen Naga did not ask. Why don't you ask? Queen Sylvanas was curious. If Duque did not save me, I would probably stray into the path of demons, and perhaps die in a place like the Serpent Shrine. Vashti's face was indifferent. Queen Sylvanas was shocked because Vashti had completely guessed her fate. Vashti raised her hand and an ice crystal mirror that was brighter and clearer than a glass mirror appeared. Looking at herself in the mirror in the appearance of a high elf, Vashti smiled sweetly. Did I guess correctly? Oh. Looks like my loyalty to Master has to go up a notch. The results were very clear. It turned out that Duque did not have to worry about his harem changing at all. Except for a few who did not know whether this change was good or bad, the rest were better than other timelines. Sure enough, not long after, Duque's bedroom in Karazhan was raided. Originally, Jaina was surrounding the icicle to start her own performance, but who knew that she was too late? The other 3 wives all came with a bunch of harem. Dear, you are indeed the best to us. I love you. On this day, although Duque's divine sword was extremely sharp, facing a double-digit juicer, the demigod Duque almost died. On the other side, the Alliance released a video. It was the scene of Jaina killing an Astrian. Sally announced, at 10:15 this morning. The Horde's Great Lich Astrian, armed with a weapon of mass destruction, focusing rainbow, attempted to infiltrate Naxxramas and launch a devastating attack. When he was discovered by us, Deputy Commander Jaina Proudmoore, Alliance Marshal Kale, that's Eversong, and Mage Khadgar worked together to kill him. Moreover, through the focusing rainbow fragment that he obtained, he developed a counter-tactic. Destroy the remaining 5, rainbow of focus. Compared to the jubilation in the Alliance, the atmosphere in the tribe was gloomy and gloomy. In Orgrimmar's great hall, Gurus was destroying everything in front of him in a frenzy. Idiot. Idiot. Trash. An Astrian, that piece of trash, he's done me in. When he angrily smashed his hall, he finally calmed down and looked at the charred tables in despair. He didn't care about the life or death of the former Sun King. What he cared about was that, less than 5 minutes after the Alliance's announcement, the remaining 5, rainbow of focus, had all exploded. Because not enough material had been injected and the surrounding elements had been absorbed, the power of the explosion was quite small. It was roughly equivalent to the power of an iron grenade. Only an unlucky guy passing by had his hand injured. But this had destroyed Gurus's hope of turning the tables. No. 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 In the Great Hall, every table and chair that could be used to hold things was piled with distress reports from all over. They wanted soldiers, food, everything. Most of them said, I'm dying. If you don't come and save me, just wait to collect my corpse. Most of the orcs were rough people. They didn't understand fancy gifts, and only used this method to express their dissatisfaction with their great chieftain. Faced with the Alliance fleet, which was high up in the sky and constantly firing cannons, the Horde had no way to deal with it. Originally, Brainless Roar had wanted to blow up Naxxramas, give the Alliance a high threat, and then reverse the situation. Now it was all over. If it wasn't for the fact that the Alliance army's advance was too stable, or too slow. He, the great chieftain, would have been tied to a stone by the angry people and sunk into the river of anger. But the Alliance was too stable. On all fronts, the Alliance's approach was to use artillery to clear the ground and eliminate all signs of resistance. Then the army moved in, the engineer battalion caught up, and began to build fortifications and lay railways on the spot. Every day, the railway network was extended towards the heart of the horde. Barbed wire and high concrete walls were built along the railway, dividing the horde's territory into pieces. Even guerrilla warfare couldn't start. The Alliance army occupied every advantageous high ground and built permanent fortifications on the spot, blockhouses, fortresses, and so on. Reinforced concrete was filled in as if it didn't cost money. In Karazhan, Jaina, who had felt that her skin had become dry and dull over the past year, wondered if her immortality had lost its effect. She wore a silk robe that was as thin as a cicada's wings and looked at the real-time images sent by the Alliance's frontlines around her as she flipped through the reports. "Yo, my dear, why don't you speed up the attack?" Most of Duque's harem was responsible for important tasks. After rushing over to have a good time, they hurried back to their posts. Those who could stay here were mostly people with a bit of free time. Duque stroked the soft black hair of a certain dragon who had transformed into Countess Katrana and watched this guy perform the ultimate skill of tequila. What was tequila? The dragon's tongue rode the sword, and its breath smelled like orchids. It was called tequila. Duque had once conquered this guy with the spoilers of fate. Now that he had received a large amount of video information from Queen Sylvia, he always felt that this guy had gone from having no love in life to the other extreme. Why was he similar to Vashti, a bit like a fanatic? Although Duque didn't dislike this. Duque enjoyed the tequila and said, "To destroy a powerful organization, you must first go crazy. The current horde isn't crazy enough. Because the only one who can truly be called a lunatic is Gurus for now." Jaina's golden eyebrows raised. "This was also designed by you?" "No. This is an inevitability of fate." Duque was extremely certain. In Orgrimmar, Gurus fell into a state of half-madness. He no longer smashed things and vented his anger on his subordinates for no reason. Like a madman, he sat on his chief's throne, moving as if he was sitting on pins and needles while muttering to himself, "What else? There must be another chance." Chapter 1929. As if responding to his plea, a voice that seemed to come from the deepest depths of hell rang in his ears. "Come. Come to the south of the endless sea. The fog of Pandaria is about to dissipate. I will show you where my power lies." Power? Yes. Power. The power to dominate the entire world of Azeroth. The voice was bewitching and mysterious. Just the faint wave of power that came from the voice was enough to make Garrosh excited. "That's right. That's power I want. To be able to defeat Duke Marcus and trample the entire alliance under our feet." Garrosh gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. Veins twisted and turned on his muscular arms like worms, looking very frightening. Garrosh suddenly stood up from his seat as the chief. If one were to say that the decadent chief a moment ago was like the child who did not dare to face his father Grom's mistakes and hid in Nagrand like a coward, then the current Garrosh had become the great hero of the horde who defeated all his rivals through Makola and ascended to the throne of the chief under the admiration of millions of orcs. "Gather all the airships that can fly across the sea for me. We don't need weapons, as long as they can be used. Let's go. Boys, I will bring you to seize the power that can destroy the Alliance." Since the Alliance's counterattack, the horde warriors who had been in a state of blindness finally found their backbone. The incompetence of a general had implicated the entire army. They were simply stunned by the Alliance's combination of land and air, as well as the multitude of races and troops. They had no way to fight back. Those who dared to charge at the Alliance were nothing but cannon fodder. Without any new orders from Garrosh, Varrock Salyafar still faithfully carried out his duty. He attempted to use night battles and other methods to slow down the Alliance's offensive. It was useless. The two major elven races of the Alliance came with night vision. In addition, the Alliance had developed and equipped a large number of ordinary humans, dwarves, and other soldiers on the front line with elemental imaging detectors. In a sense, this was more powerful than night vision because it could even see the gathering of elemental elements and even ghosts from 50 meters away. As for humanoid objects that were rejected or close to the elements, they would be highlighted 200 meters away. The entire tribe collapsed, and they were forced to retreat step by step. In a sense, the morale of the tribal warriors had been beaten down by the alliance. Moreover, the famine spread from Orgrimmar to all of Duroder, and the shortage of materials became more and more serious. There were nearly 1 million mouths, and many of them were young adults. Their demand for food far exceeded the limits of Duroder. After all, when Sal led the people west, the tribe only had a few 100,000 people, and they were already expanding to the barren lands. The orcs slaughtered all the animals that could be eaten, whether they ran on the ground or flew in the sky. They plucked out the thorns of all the edible plants on the ground and even ate the cacti, but they still could not satisfy the appetite of nearly 1 million orc refugees. Despair was spreading. Some of the pessimistic orcs were already thinking about their own lives as slaves in the prison camps. They had heard about the miserable life in the slave camps from the older generation. But compared to starving to death, it seemed that being a slave was acceptable. But no orc dared to say it out loud, because the great chief, Gurus, was a typical warmonger. Some people also began to miss Sal. Perhaps Sal was a good-for-nothing in the eyes of the orcs, and had always been accommodating to the alliance. But under Sal's rule, no orc starved to death, and there would be no raging alliance fleet. The bad side of human nature was revealed at this time, and some orcs began to promote Sal's good side. Even the mining for food plan, which had been denounced by the warmongers as betraying the interests of the orcs, was pulled out and praised as wise. The current tribe was mainly made up of beast men, but not all beast men were on the same side. In the end, the first tribe that was formed was no different from the current one. It was still formed by the union of countless large and small clans. If Gurus had come out a day later, there might have been a large-scale battle within the tribe, just like when the various clans were on the verge of destruction in Draenor back then. In order to compete for the scarcer and scarcer resources, they killed and eliminated the weak. Let's go. To the south. I only want the strongest and most elite warriors. Gurus's announcement lifted the spirits of the tribespeople. They waved their weapons and consciously let the strongest warriors of the clans follow Gurus onto the airship. Being simple-minded, they never thought about whether they could break through the Alliance's air blockade. In fact, at this point, there was a fierce debate within the Alliance. The young and strong faction advocated a triumphant march straight into Orgrimmar. After all, it was a simple matter to bring the main city of the tribe into the range of the airship's cannons. From the day the Alliance occupied the Azhara region, built the port and pier, and stationed the airships, they were ready to go south at any time to cause trouble. They had been waiting for this day for a long time. But the moderate faction strongly opposed it. They cited various examples of the Alliance and the Horde working together to fight against foreign enemies, from the time when the Horde united with the Horde at Mount Hyjal to the Burning Legion and killed Archimonde, to the later Molten Core heroes, and so on. They were just blinded by Gurus' hellscream. If they had a milder leader, the Horde would be a help to the Alliance. Several middle and high-level bishops of the Church of Holy Light waved their arms and shouted. Although their voices were not mainstream, they were quite popular among the middle and lower classes, especially among the young. Only the higher-ups of the Alliance remained silent. Kalia looked very worried. At this time, Elusia sent a magic voice transmission to Kalia. Did you know? A person like Duque who takes one step at a time actually did not prepare a prison camp. Can you guess what this means? Ah! Kalia exclaimed in a low voice. Of course, she knew what a prison camp and a detention center was. After the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, the countries of the Alliance almost went bankrupt in order to build prisons, assign guards, and feed the green-skinned gluttons. Apart from Lordaeron, who used the orcs as gladiators to make money, the other countries were full of complaints. Kalia secretly made a chop gesture to Elusia. Did she mean that Duque wanted to kill the entire Horde? Elusia shook her head. I don't know. If there is no suitable reason, slaughtering an intelligent race of more than 1 million people would cause serious concern in the Alliance. Just as the people below were making noise, the front line of the Alliance suddenly received a strange order. When the frontline fleet encountered the Horde's airships breaking out of the encirclement, they were to stop them with fierce momentum and a very low hit rate. It was also stipulated that the number of Horde airships that were shot down could not exceed 20% of the total number of airships. Violators, from officers to soldiers, would all be sentenced to more than 10 years in prison. Chapter 1930. What the F***CK? It was the first time that the Alliance officers had seen such a strange order after so many years of fighting. They were all confused and even angry, asking for confirmation from the command center. Who knew that the person who appeared on the magic communication network this time wasn't the female soldier they were familiar with, but the big boss William? This is the unanimous decision of the Throne Conference. You have to obey even if you don't want to. Alliance soldiers, your duty is to obey orders. You can object, but we'll see you in the military court. William, who had a bad temper, was the most suitable person to play the role of a black-faced god. The soldiers below immediately fell silent. This kind of nonsensical order wasn't easy to grasp. It wouldn't be good for those who were too lousy to go. Although they were usually lousy, if they weren't careful, they could fire a cannon. If they had a hit rate of 50%, a group of people would be finished. In the end, the middle-level officers of the Alliance discussed for a long time. First, they expanded the scope of the investigation, then prepared elite cannoneers and a large number of specially prepared artillery shells. As expected, the Horde actually took advantage of the night to sneak in. That night, the night was not at all alluring. Dark clouds covered the sky, and there was no light. It was obvious that it had nothing to do with the moon goddess. Nearly 600 flying battleships formed a formation that resembled a long snake formation. They took off from Agrima and headed straight southeast. In order not to be discovered by the Alliance and to guide the flying battleships behind, Magatha came up with an idea: to use a trumpet-shaped cover at the stern of the first guiding ship and light up 3 red lights. This way, the Alliance would not be able to see it from the direction of the ship. The sea was so big, and the sky was so vast. Who would be able to discover the flying battleships in the middle of the night? By the time the Alliance discovered that Agrima had lost its flying battleships the next day, the fleet had already left. Yes, the Horde's idea was beautiful. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the Alliance, it was as foolish as an ostrich with its head buried in the sand. It thought that if it couldn't see the enemy wouldn't be able to see it either. However, it didn't know that the enemy had already seen everything and could do whatever they wanted. The Alliance was also speechless. There were nearly 500 warlocks in this expedition led by Brainless Roar. Every demon enslaved by a warlock was a spy for the Eridar Gemini. Just the Alliance's new composite radar alone could easily discover the existence of the Horde flying fleet. As early as the Blazing Crusade, the Alliance had already developed rudimentary underwater sonar and radar systems. After so many years of improvement, it was already the limit of what cache technology could do. It was called a composite type because it also had a technology-type electronic signal radar and a magic-type elemental detection radar. Any target that couldn't reflect radar wavelengths and had a high degree of elemental polymerization reaction would be magnified on the high magnification display. The Alliance had now perfected its night surveillance ships. They surrounded Agrima from more than 100 kilometers away without any blind spots. The funny thing was that the tribe was still putting on a clumsy performance. Using a diversion tactic, they sent hundreds of Wyvern Knights to attack the Alliance's front lines in Mulgore and the Barren Lands. Duque really wanted to sing a song. I turned a blind eye to what I should have done. Naxxramas had already flown 100 kilometers east of Orgrimmar. At this time, the voice of the monitor girl rang throughout the entire command center. Confirming the Horde's aerial fleet: 81 armored airships, 338 wooden airships, 296 hot air balloon airships. As soon as the girl finished speaking, the officers in the command center burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. Be serious. You bastards. Be serious, ha 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 ha. Damn it, the one who laughed the loudest was Bulang Bronzebeard himself. Damn it. Scarlet and I can wipe out half of them. Is the Horde so poor that they want to rob the Alliance's museum? Kudrin Wildhammer roared. Come on, there's no place for you. General Taylor is the first one. Jaina, the commander of the Alliance's frontline, chuckled. In front, General Taylor looked like he had lost his mind. He helplessly ordered, the first reconnaissance team, go forward and pretend to have found the enemy within visual range. Soon, a fleet consisting of a flying cruiser and 2 flying destroyers slowly sailed from 20 kilometers away at an angle of 60 degrees. If it was a normal situation, they would have opened fire from 10 kilometers away. The Horde, who only relied on their eyes to find the enemy, only discovered the Alliance's patrol team when the 2 sides were 5 kilometers away. This was because the Alliance's flying warships were flashing red warning lights at the bow, hull, and stern to avoid collisions at night. On the radar screen, it could be clearly seen that the Horde seemed to be startled. Within 5 kilometers, they began to change direction towards the south in an attempt to avoid the enemy and muddle through. Commander, can we fire the warning flare now? The captain of the reconnaissance team asked bitterly. No. Our vision now is about 3,000 meters. Don't change direction. Only when you're 3,000 meters away will you be allowed to act according to the plan, General Taylor replied bitterly. The Horde's fleet was too big, and they were not trained to sail at night. In the eyes of the Alliance, the Horde's fleet was like a flock of startled sparrows. Although they had changed direction, they were in a mess. Then, God damn it. 2 of the Horde's flying ships collided with each other, creating a huge and bright fireball in the night sky. In Karazhan, Duke, who was watching this scene, slapped his forehead and deeply face-bombed. Damn it, this is like playing chess with all the chariots, horses, and cannons, but the opponents still can't win. This time, the Alliance's patrol team could no longer pretend to be blind, right? General Taylor's eyes twitched, and he ordered, fire the signal flare in 60 seconds. A minute later, the captain of the patrol team held the stopwatch and released the red signal flare, which meant that the enemy was attacking. When 3 scarlet red signal flare rose from the cruisers, the radar could see that the Horde's fleet was even more chaotic. Even without the radar, the report from the fleet in front said that there were at least 5 Horde ships colliding with each other. The 3 patrolling Alliance ships opened fire. They didn't deliberately aim, but the Horde's flying ships were too densely packed. The destroyer on the left opened fire with 3 120mm main cannons. It was just a random shot, but all 6 of the cannons hit their targets. Immediately, 6 brighter fireballs rose in the night sky. General Taylor, who was watching the battle from the flagship, Bismarck, cursed on the spot, "Are you King stupid? Those greenskins who rely on their naked eyes to observe the battle don't even know what ballistics is. Can't you just aim your cannons into the sea? All the cannoneers on the Z-23 should clean the toilet for a month." Chapter 1931. The captain of Z-23 felt bitter too. He turned his head and said, "Admiral Taylor has orders. Those cannoneers were too accurate. They have to clean the toilets for a month. Then, those cooks in the kitchen, didn't they complain all day about how bitter it was for them to watch their brothers having sex while wearing a green hat? Now it's time for them to open fire. Who knew that even the cookhouse cooks would perform better than they should? Their hit rate was as high as 31%. Many of the Horde's airships were made of wood. Some of the airships were still able to stay in the sky after being hit by the non-powered mechanisms. They became the light in the dark, guiding the way for the chefs. Even the cooks had to be replaced. Admiral Taylor was in a mess. Don't tell me that the entire Horde fleet was destroyed by 3 airships. Fortunately, this worry was unnecessary. After being attacked for a full 5 minutes, the Horde fleet finally began to fight back amidst the curses of Moron Roar. Bang! 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 Continuous cannons sounded. The Horde cannoneers didn't care too much and just fired in the same direction. In Admiral Taylor's eyes, the flashes of the cannons were like holy light of salvation. Before the cannonball even reached the patrol fleet, Taylor shouted in the comms, "You've all been hit. I repeat. Hookby Squadron, you've all been hit and are on fire. Leave the battle zone immediately." The captain of the flagship of the patrol fleet, Prince Eugen, rolled his eyes. "Did you guys hear that? Night artillery battles were the most important test of technology and training. Even within the Alliance, with the help of all kinds of advanced technology, as long as the distance was over 5,000 meters, the hit rate would still not exceed 10%. Not to mention the Horde cannoneers who had never been trained in night artillery battles. Fortunately, even if the Horde wasn't strong, the Alliance's actors were strong. Under the captain's orders, the prepared Alliance soldiers lit up the barrels of gunpowder they got from the museum. Bang, 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 the sound of the explosion was easily transmitted to the Horde fleet 3 kilometers away. Then the Horde people were overjoyed. Hit. Ha ha ha. Hit. The entire Horde fleet was in an uproar. The scene they wanted to see appeared. The 3 Alliance warships burst into flames at the same time. The silhouette of the ship was clearly visible. Under the watchful eyes of the Horde warriors, the 3 Alliance airships began to fall. They weren't fast, but they were falling away from the Horde's fleet. In fact, the soldiers on the 3 Alliance warships were feeling bored. Traditional black gunpowder barrels could not penetrate Prince Eugen's 80mm armor. It was such a loud sound, but the armor only dented a little. On the Horde's flagship, Gurus was not too happy. The Alliance has already discovered it. There's no point in hiding it. Light the torch. Let Hellscream lead the way. Full speed ahead. This brave move won the cheers of the entire Horde fleet. On the other side, Duque didn't want to watch anymore. Should I say, brainless roar is indeed brainless roar? If the Alliance really needs to rely on sight to find you, then why did you light a fire in the middle of the night? Next to Duque, Vashj and Onyxia were both giggling. Are we going to watch it? Vashj asked. The show has started. Let's continue watching. Send the order to Tyler to take it easy. After Duque sent the order to Jaina through magic transmission, Duque was also discouraged. He felt a little bored. Come, Onyxia, have a glass of tequila. Okay. The black dragon girl crawled over on all fours. On the other side, after receiving the order from the highest command, Tyler felt a headache. He had prepared a fleet of over 100 warships. Now he realized that it was making a mountain out of a molehill. But a few minutes ago, the Alliance had only lost 3 warships. It wasn't good for the Alliance to send too few airships, so they decided to reduce the number by half. 60 warships charged over aggressively. In order to let the Horde discover them in advance, they had to light a torch at the bow of the ship so that the Horde could discover them from 10 kilometers away. At this time, Gurus finally decided to transfer the best armored airships over to fight the Alliance to the death, and let the rest of the airships full of Horde soldiers leave in advance. This time, the Alliance seemed to have learned their lesson. An hour later, more than 60 airships arrived. They lined up at a distance of 5,000 meters, forming a 3-dimensional trapezoid shape. They positioned their hulls horizontally and fired in the direction of the wind. Bang! 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 The continuous cannons of the Alliance fleet rang through the dark night. The Horde could only see the Alliance's fleet light up, but they realized that not many cannons hit the Horde's warships. In total, the Horde's armored airships would be hit 7 or 8 times with one airship being blown up. The Horde's new cannons were also gathered here. The range of the cannons was enough, and they were indeed the newer TNT cannons. However, most of these airships were modified second-hand airships that were smuggled from the Alliance through various channels before the war. Firstly, the Horde couldn't produce these cannons, and secondly, they couldn't produce the cannons themselves either. It could be said that every time they fired, they would have one less. Before, no one was willing to pay, and they were even more unwilling to use live ammunition. One could imagine the accuracy of the cannons. Later, after some calculations, the Horde's fleet only fired 2 cannons that hit the Alliance's warships that night. One hit the side armor of the Scharnhorst, and the other hit the front armor of the Turbots' main cannon, and the cannons bounced off. If the Alliance really wanted to fire, they would be able to kill almost every shot. Unfortunately, General Taylor was also afraid. For tonight, he had prepared a large number of sawdust cannons, also known as salute cannons. Those things were just to make a noise. Of course, he had also prepared a large number of cannons for actual combat. The cannons were all painted with clear red markings. If there was no order, whoever used it would have their hands chopped off. Even the cannons that landed in the middle of the night were often the Type 3 cannons, used to deal with small targets such as flying dragons. The two sides fought for most of the night, giving people the feeling that it was 2 internet trolls fighting each other online, and no one could hurt the other. In the end, it was already 4:30 in the morning, and it would soon be dawn. Once dawn came, it would be very fake to maintain this accuracy. Taylor ordered his own ships to start getting hit. Hay and old blankets burned on the decks of the Alliance's airships. After a fierce fire, the Alliance's fleet finally withdrew ahead of time. After that, looking at the number of 102 ships that had fallen, Taylor broke out in a cold sweat. 18.3%. This was the fall coefficient that was calculated after taking into account the level of the enemy's ships and calculating various factors. With great suspicion, Taylor returned to Naxxramas. When he saw Duque, who was said to have traveled through time and space, he suddenly felt that he already knew the answer to everything. Chapter 1932. Duque had many identities. Basically, it was enough to remember that he was the strongest person in the Alliance, the creator of the Alliance, the creator and leader of the Alliance's current glory. Duque still had a calm expression. The corners of his mouth were slightly raised, as if he was proud of himself. He was still wearing his usual white robe with blue edges, which had almost become his trademark. "Ah. Taylor, you're here. You and your brothers have worked hard on this mission." Taylor's mouth twitched for a long time before he saluted. "No, my brothers just put on a good show. It was easier than training, that's not a problem at all. The one who really worked hard is you, Commander Marcus. You're the one who worked the hardest in the entire Alliance. Compared to the hardships of the journey of time, this is nothing. Sit." Duque pointed at the chair in front of the desk and then sat down. General Taylor also sat down. Just in time. "I'll take this opportunity to say these words to the leaders of the Throne Conference and the generals of the Alliance." "Understood, Commander." Duque snapped his fingers with his left hand. Suddenly, the heads of the leaders of the Throne Conference, as well as the images of over 100 generals of the Alliance, appeared in the surrounding void. "I believe you've already been informed that I'm back. Then let's cut the crap and go straight to the commentary. Do you know why the Alliance is slowly advancing and allowing some of the tribes to leave Orgrimmar? The Alliance clearly has the strength to destroy the tribal armies 100 times over. Why did they let those tribes leave?" Taylor shook his head. Most of the generals shook their heads. This was the biggest doubt of the Alliance's frontline soldiers. Duque flipped his hand and a holographic map of Azeroth appeared in front of the two of them. Duque raised his finger and the territories occupied by the Alliance members were dyed blue, while the tribe's territories were dyed red. The world of Azeroth is beautiful and huge. However, even in such a world, there was no room for 2 organizations the size of the Alliance. The dominance of the world, the uneven distribution of resources, the past war and hatred, all of these factors will inevitably lead the 2 organizations to war. As a direct victim of the First and Second Battle of the Dark Portal, I hate the Beastmen tribes more than anyone else. Emotionally, I can't wait to drag all the Beastmen out and hang them. Unfortunately, I can't do it. Every intelligent race has an extremely tenacious life force. After the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, the Alliance spent 10 years to clean up the Beastmen who had fled in all directions, but they still couldn't clean up all of them. If the Warsong clan hadn't taken the initiative to retreat, the Tirisful woodland would still be a paradise for orcs today. The Eridar tribe that joined the Burning Legion spent 25,000 years chasing the Dreenii, who they viewed as traitors. Did they succeed? At this point, even Iril the Hoof had a thoughtful expression on his face. I infiltrated the Burning Legion. Unless it was a war that completely destroyed an entire planet or completely changed the living environment of the entire world, no intelligent race could wipe out another intelligent race with a large population. This is the lesson and warning left to us by countless civilizations. But on the other hand, the Horde began to drag the Alliance back in the war against evil, and even showed absolute hostility. This is an indisputable fact. So what should the Alliance do to eliminate the huge hostile organization that is the Horde without violating the principles of the Alliance? On the other side of each magic mirror, there was a soul that was deep in thought and reflection. Most of the pro-war faction were Avengers. They had an unforgettable hatred for the Horde, and they desired to completely destroy the Horde. Most of the moderates were highly educated, and had a good international perspective and a rational heart. They saw more and further. The moderates were easier to incite. With the leader of the Alliance, led by Duque, controlling the public opinion of the entire Alliance, they were the easiest to accept the official will of the Alliance. If it was possible, Duque could even change the Alliance to an imperial system within a few days, and he himself would be the emperor. Duque did not want that to happen. This was the world of Azeroth, a real world with all kinds of intelligent races, all kinds of thoughts, and all kinds of possibilities. Because of his transmigration, he had truly entered this world that had written countless heroic epics, and had the status, power, and harem that he had today. Perhaps Duque was greedy and desired more, but this was not at the cost of wiping out the wisdom, power, and hard work of the other Alliance heroes. Even in his harem, the women had their own ideas and standpoints. So Duque preferred to let his subordinates think. Acting rashly and killing blindly would not work. This was because the will of the world hoped that the mortals could completely unite and overcome the difficulties of the Burning Legion and the attack of the ancient gods. She certainly did not want to see too much pointless killing and internal friction. So how would it be done? Duque gave a hint. Do you remember when we first arrived at Draenor? How did we deal with the relationship there and control the territory there? Imriel suddenly came to a realization. Rope in the races that are closer to the ideals of the Alliance, and then attack the irredeemable evil races? That's right, that was what the Alliance did back then. Under Duque's leadership, a small team was sent to get in touch with the Dreenii of Shotrath City, and they directly obtained a lot of valuable information and a reliable ally. At the end of the day, it was the Dreenii and Naru's holy light that was closest to the teachings of the Alliance. Duque nodded. That's right. I plan to expand the Alliance after this war, and propose that the original tribes that are closer to the Alliance's ideals be brought into the Alliance, and give them the status and treatment of the allied countries. For example, the Tauren and Darkspear trolls. When Duque said this, everyone could not help but look at Queen Sin Dorii, and Sylvanas who appeared with Duque. Queen Sylvanas pursed her lips. It was obvious that Duque had already informed her. Whether it's Quell Dorii or Sin Dorii, our former enemy was the Amani trolls. The trolls were also divided into many different clans. In fact, as the descendants of the ancient troll empire Amani, the Amani trolls had nothing to do with the Darkspear trolls. Even if the Darkspear trolls wanted to get closer to their relatives, they would have to get closer to Zulf Gurub, which was closer to Stormwind. That was the Gurubashi trolls. The Blood Elves did not object, which meant that the obstacle to the Darkspear trolls joining the Alliance had been cleared. Of course, it's necessary to pull in one faction and fight another. Now that I've let the strongest orc elites in the original tribes go to the south, I'm letting them face the final choice that fate has given them. Chapter 1933. The next moment, Duque raised his hand, and a map that no one had seen except Tyrant appeared in front of them. It was a map of the ancient Kalimdor continent. In the ancient war, because of the explosion of the First Well of Eternity, the ancient Kalendor continent was completely divided. The central part, with Azhara as the center, sank to the bottom of the endless sea. Duque slowly began to push the continental plates on the map. The two pieces on the right are the eastern kingdoms where most of the alliance countries are now. The one on the left is the current Kalendor, and the one on the top is Northrend. Then, what about the one at the bottom? The pupils of the alliance leaders and generals suddenly shrank. Land, rich land marked in green. Every leader knew the importance of territory. Even if the territory in Northrend could not be used for a while, it would always have a special value over time. For example, the mineral deposits mined there had begun to become a very important part of the alliance's market. The farmers recruited by the alliance had been planting all kinds of crops in the relatively mild climate of Northrend for several years in a row. Now that the alliance's technology and transportation level were getting better and better, having a piece of fertile land was definitely a dream come true. All of a sudden, the breathing of the alliance leaders quickened. Unfortunately, the next second, Duque dispelled their thoughts. This land has long had a master. It's just that in the past 10,000 years, the entire continent has been covered in thick fog. No ship dares to sail blindly in the thick fog, or the ship will be destroyed and the people will die. That's why this continent is not known to the world. Duque cleared his throat. Here, would like to introduce the name of this continent to everyone, Pandaria. There are many intelligent races living on it, mainly Pandaren. So I hope that after you enter this continent, you will act cautiously and not violate the alliance's policies. Then, we only need to wait for the tribe to enter the core area of this continent, and Gurus will bring the tribe into the deepest abyss of despair. With that, Duque began to introduce the situation of Pandaria in his memory to the core members of the alliance. After the legendary battle in which the Titans defeated a group of ancient gods and elemental lords, ancient Kalendor was in a state of chaos. At that time, the most intelligent creatures on the continent were the trolls. Later on, the trolls evolved into night elves, forming the Kaldorii Empire. 10,000 years ago, other than the two main races, the night elves and the trolls, there were actually several races in the southernmost part of the continent. For example, Fiend Gu and the Pandaman. It had to be said that the culture and history of Pandaria, in the eyes of a transmigrator like Duque, had a very Chinese style of story. It was something that had completely changed the style of the game. Duque himself felt that it was very out of character for a Western fantasy to turn into a Chinese fantasy. The world was just that wonderful, wasn't it? Approximately 11,000 to 10,000 years ago in the Dark Portal calendar, the Night Elves began to indulge in magic and even abuse it. After the Pandaran's advice was ignored, the alliance between the Kaldorii Empire and the Pandaren Empire was severed. After Xiao Hao became the emperor of the Pandaren, he discovered that the actions of the Night Elves would destroy the world. Then, he and his partner, the Monkey King, began their ascetic journey to save Pandaria. After many years of hard work, Xiao Hao and the Monkey King, with the help of the four heavenly deities, discovered and sealed 6 of the negative emotions, doubt, despair, violence, hatred, anger, and fear, in the underground area near the temples of the 4 heavenly deities. However, they let go of the 7th negative emotion, pride. Then, Xiao Hao gathered the elites of the country and established the Shadow Sect to be responsible for guarding the seal of the fiends. After the explosion of the Well of Eternity, which later generations called the Great Cataclysm, Xiao Hao ascended to the Plentiful Spring platform and cast spells according to the knowledge he obtained, causing the Pandaria continent south of Kalendor to be surrounded by an impenetrable fog, preventing it from being destroyed by the explosion. Xiao Hao disappeared from then on and merged with Pandaria, becoming the last emperor of the Panda people. The area where the Thunder Throne was located became the Thunder God Island, which was also protected from destruction by this fog. The central area of the Zendala tribe relied on the help of powerful magic to survive the Great Cataclysm and became the Zendala Island. Every 5 years, the Zendala tribe would gather all the troll tribes in the world for a meeting to deal with various problems. They still had the power and prosperity of many troll tribes, but their strength was not as strong as before. After the end of the Pandaren Empire, the Goldfish people and Macaques also established a temporary dynasty, but it was quickly destroyed due to the betrayal of these two races. Since then, the goldfish people and macaques became enemies. The shadow sect gradually developed into the army of the Pandaren, and their responsibilities increased. They were responsible for defending the coiled dragon ridge and helping the four heavenly gods and the golden lotus cult. After that, although the fiends still appeared from time to time with the wars between ancient fiends, the lizard men, macaques, and goldfish people, the shadow sect could deal with them alone. Some of the Taurans who were nomadic hunters in the Pandaria area were trapped in the harsh environment of the Mantis Plateau after the Great Cataclysm. They gradually evolved into the wild Taurans and relied on plundering mantises and Pandaren to survive. They had conflicts with the Shadow sect from time to time. On an island in the outer seas of Pandaria, the four heavenly gods and their believers built a huge trial field. The Pandaren came here to accept the trial and follow the path of the last emperor, Xiao Hao. There was also a wild Tauran clan living here. At some point, this island disappeared from its original position, and in the following thousands of years, it would randomly appear in the outer seas of Pandaria. It was called Eternal Island. The ancient fiend warlord, Gelsang, led his army to attack the territory of the mantises. The ancient fiend's secret master, Hai Xian, invented a magic smoothbore cannon to deal with the flying mantises. However, the cunning advisor, Xue Xing, pretended to be the warlord's decree, so Hai Xian had no choice but to use the weapon before it was completely completed. The young mantis man, Kurluk, followed the others to attack the Great Wall and fought with Gelsang's army. His responsibility was to throw bombs at the ancient fiends from the sky. Kurluk was curious about the eagle's hunting method and constantly trained himself to imitate it, which was something that adult mantises could not do. The Caraxi Council noticed this and deliberately taught Kurluk a lot of knowledge. Kurluk decided to practice his skill of landing from the sky to attack the enemy, and was equipped with a pair of sharp blades. The ancient fiend's new cannon was very successful, and almost all the mantis flyers were wiped out, except for Kurluk. He swooped into the ancient fiend's camp and started a massacre, destroying the weapon and killing Hai Xian. He was praised by the Empress and was given the name Windswept. Chapter 1934. Not long after, Kelruk once again charged into the ancient devil camp and began a massacre. Warlord Gelsang dealt with Xue Xing, who had forged the order. Advisor Fermin suggested that Gelsang use a divine artifact to cut off the connection between the mantis men and the queen. It succeeded. The mantis man queen was dead, and everyone fell into despair. Fermin also created a large jar inlaid with flavonoids, which could be used to imprison souls. 6 days later, the desperate Caraxi prepared to awaken a hero, the summoner of blood Nurnak. The one who was awakened was Kelruk. Nurnak's ability was to influence the other mantis men, and with his superb strategic ability, he perfectly controlled the mantis men army to fight. Nurnak taught Kelruk a lot of history and battle strategy. They prepared to divert the ancient devil army, and then the two of them led a surprise attack to destroy the divine artifact. Although the ancient devils retreated in defeat, Warlord Gelsang hid in the large jar, and the mantis men could not kill him. After the two of them killed Fermin and snatched the divine artifact, Nurnak was killed by the arcane power contained within. Kelruk smashed the divine artifact into the arcane cannon, destroying it. The queen was finally saved. In the end, the Windstealer Kelruk also became a hero. He was sealed until the empire was in danger. The Door of Darkness started from about 3,000 to 2,700 years ago. The races living on Pandaria no longer understood the state of the other parts of Azeroth, and even thought that they had been destroyed. That was until the Pandaman Lu Lang rode on the back of the turtle god's son and left Pandaria to explore other parts of the world beyond the fog, becoming the first Panda Man explorer. The god's son returned once every 5 years. Over the years, more and more people joined Lu Lang's expedition team, and the god's son grew bigger and bigger, becoming a wandering island that roamed around the world. The Pandaman monks on the god's son island had 2 philosophies, the Earth-Water School and the Fire-Metal School. The leaders of these 2 schools were Aisha Cloudwalker and G. Firepalm. After Lu Lang's death, the god's son never returned to Pandaria, and the Pandaman living on his back cut off contact with Pandaria. Both sides thought that the other had been destroyed. The Door of Darkness started from 2700 to 26 years. Although the Panda people who lived on the Lost Islands occasionally appeared in various parts of Azeroth, the other races knew very little about the Panda people. Among them, the most active Pandaren explorer was Chen Stormlicker. In the original history, he had fought alongside the Horde in the war between the Kalandor Alliance and the Horde in 22 years. On the Son of God, Lily Tempest Licker dreamed of becoming a traveler like Uncle Chen, so she started to keep a travel diary. First, it was about the adventures of her home, the Lost Island. Then, Lily made up her mind to explore the whole world. On the Lost Island, Lily learned about the story between Lu Lang and Shenzhen through Chen's letter. After the Hungry Ghost Festival, Lily left the Lost Islands to explore the world and search for Uncle Chen. After experiencing a thrilling adventure that would even fill up to 500 words in the history books, Chen and Lily finally returned to the Lost Island. Recently, after the cataclysm caused by Deathwing, although the locals did not understand, the cataclysm still had an impact on the Pandaria continent, and Xiaohao's seal on Sha had also loosened. On the Lost Island, a missing Pandaren accidentally brought back the Pearl of Pandaria. Lily saw Pandaria from it and left the Lost Island, deciding to search for this continent. To protect Lily, Chen also left. In the original history, Lily came to the Iron Furnace Fort but did not receive any help. Chen found her, and the two went to Hidden Treasure Bay together. They participated in a battle between the Blackwater Bandits and the Bloodsail Pirates, and received help from the Kirin Tor mages. In the end, the Blackwater Bandits brought them to Gadgetsan. Chen and Lily followed the Explorer Association's convoy to Oldham. In Ramcon, Torval was judging the Nephysites. Chen could not help a Nephysite repent. However, Torval still thanked them and gave them a boat to sail. Meanwhile, Chen and Lily were separated in a violent storm on the sea. The two were rescued by the Alliance and the Horde respectively. Then, they participated in a conflict on the sea between the Alliance and the Horde. A few days later, the two finally drifted to Pandaria. In this life, with Duque in charge, would they let go of a legendary Pandaren hero? As a veteran player, Duque definitely remembered how Blizzard Daddy introduced the monk class to all the players in the opening cinematic of Pandaria. The Great Horde General Nazgûl and Alliance General Taylor fought without any enemies. When faced with the legendary hero Chen Stormlicker, they were beaten up by Chen alone. Just like a father teaching his son a lesson, he did not have any temper at all. After Duque roughly introduced Pandaria to the entire Alliance military, Duque clapped his hands, and the door behind Taylor slowly opened. Duque's maid, Vanessa, led the two humanoid pandas into the room. Wow! Many people in the magic mirror exclaimed. There were so many intelligent races in the world that ordinary people would never have the chance to see in their entire lives. However, for such a cute, furry, and intelligent creature with a burly build, it was a little magical. It should be said that many queens were so cute that they bled. Especially when they saw Lily, who was wearing red clothes and had curly braids of black hair. Kalia and Elusia were completely captivated. So cute. I want to hug her. Jaina calmed down a bit. Enough, sisters, don't scare her. As a traveler, Lily and her uncle, Chen, had seen the world. But they did not expect to receive such a high standard of treatment. As soon as they left the Lost Island and entered the Alliance, they were discovered by the Alliance's intelligence organization and reported. They were sent to Naxxramas as national treasures, national guests. Because the Alliance officials told them personally that the Alliance's commander, Duke Marcus, had the most detailed information on Pandaria. In fact, this was indeed the case. Before meeting General Taylor, Duque had a detailed discussion with the uncle and nephew. The content was mainly about Pandaria and Yashaji. In the archaeological relic, Yogg-Saron's Box of Mysteries, it had said quietly, in that sunken city, he fell into a dream. In the land of Nyarosa, there is only sleep. The god of drowning's heart is like black ice. Are you having the same dream again? The seven-eyed black goat cast its bright gaze at us from the outside. The seven-eyed black goat referred to was the ancient god, Yashaji. Chapter 1935. Yashaji was an ancient god. According to Caraxi's legend, he devoured hope and released despair. What he breathed in was courage, and what he breathed out was fear. In order to prevent the majority of mortals from thinking that it was just a legend, Caraxi also talked about the war between the Titans and the ancient gods, as well as the death of Yashaji. Yashaji's body was extremely large. This ancient god that stood above the earth had a body made of flesh and blood. On it were countless huge mouths that constantly opened and closed, as well as dark, cold eyes. At the beginning of the war between the Titans' creations and the ancient gods, the guardians of the pantheon gathered together and pointed the spear of justice at the dark empire ruled by Yashaji. Their first obstacle was the holy city around Yashaji, which was a fortress made of Yashaji's flesh and blood. The guardians firmly believed that as long as they completely overturned the largest faceless one fortress in Azeroth, they could wipe out the enemy in one fell swoop. The guardians led the crowd to destroy wave after wave of faceless ones swarming like a tide, and then marched with difficulty toward Yashaji's mountain-like body. By the time they captured the holy city and launched an attack on the ancient gods, the scattered bodies of the Titans' creations and the faceless ones had already submerged the mountains and rivers. Yashaji was far more powerful than the guardians imagined. The Titans' creation's spirit was poisoned by him, and then they gave birth to fear and could no longer see a glimmer of hope. The pantheon couldn't help but worry that their servants would be overturned in the claws of the ancient gods. Therefore, they temporarily put aside the possible harm to the world and took a more direct action. The father of the pantheon, the strongest titan, Amon-Thul, used his body that was as large as the moon to break through the stormy skies of Azeroth. He used one hand to firmly grasp the writhing body of the ancient god. Immediately, he pulled his sturdy arm and pulled the ancient god out of the world's surface in one fell swoop. Yashaji's gigantic body immediately disintegrated. His boundless body scattered in all directions, instantly shattering countless mountains. Even the creations of the hundreds of pantheon guardians near Yashaji could not help but turn into ashes. Legend had it that Yashaji's last terrifying breath covered Pandaria and left a terrifying shadow on this land that could not be eradicated. These shadows were the current fiends. The ancient god Yashaji exhaled before his death formed 7 baleful auras. They were the baleful aura of fear, the baleful aura of madness, the baleful aura of anger, the baleful aura of doubt, the baleful aura of confusion, the baleful aura of hate, and the baleful aura of pride. They were born from the negative emotions and negative energy of humans. Fiendish demons existed on the Pandaria continent and could not be destroyed. After greeting Storm and his nephew, Duque officially announced the situation in Pandaria in front of the Alliance's higher-ups and generals. That's the way things are now. The Alliance and the Horde were in a state of war. The Horde is at an extreme disadvantage. I suspect that they were tempted by Yashaji's remnant will and set off for Pandaria before the fog covering Pandaria dissipated. Duque looked at Jen and reminded, "So I have to tell you uncle and nephew that your journey to find your homeland is actually a cruel war. The Alliance has a lot of reason to believe that the Horde will use the flames of war to ignite the Pandaria continent. Here, I can only promise you that the Alliance will not take the initiative to support any righteous or neutral race or faction." Duque changed the topic. But the Alliance will not tolerate the Horde or the existence that has been eroded by Yashaji's evil power. If we have to use war to solve it, the Alliance will not be afraid to start a war with many parties. Although Gen Tempest Liquor looked like a big-bellied panda, his intelligence was also not to be underestimated. Apart from the extremely powerful muscles contained in his fat, Jen's intelligence was also not to be underestimated. Duque's open and honest way of doing things immediately won his favor. In this life, because of Duque's existence, Jaina did not betray her father. Jen, who originally had a deep relationship with the Horde through the betrayal of her father, was only close friends with the few big bosses of the Horde, Sar, Wajin, and Rexer in this life. After all, It was Dalen Proudmoore's fleet that slaughtered the Darkspear Trolls' village and flattened the entire island. In a rage, Old Shin followed Rexer and Wajin to attack Dalen's fleet. This kind of friendship that had been through life and death was completely different from the friendship of ordinary friends. Therefore, Old Shin did not have any grudges against the Alliance in this life. Instead, he felt that the powerful demigod and commander of the Alliance, Duque, was kind enough. The round-headed panda hero, Old Shin, nodded. I'm glad that such a powerful world organization can still maintain such an upright and noble philosophy. I'm happy to be a witness to this scene. At the same time, I hope to help deal with Yashaji's malevolent aura. Old Shin left some leeway in his words. He was a witness, which meant that if the Alliance was vicious and just talked but not acted, or said one thing and did another, he did not rule out the possibility of defecting to the Horde that might be the messenger of justice. Duque smiled. Thank you. Time will tell. In this regard, he had absolute confidence. In fact, when he met Storm's spirits and his nephew yesterday, when Duque showed the remains of Thun and Yogg-Saron that were sealed by the holy light, the uncle and nephew were already 80% convinced. Old Shen's final caution was ultimately because Pandaria was the homeland of the Pandaren. It was not wrong to be somewhat vigilant against outsiders. This was what a legendary hero with rich knowledge and powerful strength would do. Old Shen was destined to not be able to escape. Duque had even reserved a position for him in the Alliance hero group. As for the trouble caused by Yashaji and Pandaria, Duque, who knew the history well, studied it for a long time and found that he really had no way to stop the fire of disaster from igniting. Yashaji was dead, but he caused trouble for thousands of years. As long as there was any war on Pandaria, it was bound to trigger a lot of negative emotions from the victims. Fear, madness, anger, doubt, confusion, hatred, pride, any kind of negative emotions accumulated would directly arouse malevolent aura. To deal with malevolent aura, the easiest way was to have no sorrow or joy. All the ethnic groups on the entire continent would be happy and harmonious. Everyone would sing songs and eat barbecue and spend every day. But was that possible? Even if there were no tribes, just the large number of demon-kin, mantises, and Zandera trolls that remained were enough to cause trouble all day long. Regardless of whether the tribes and the Alliance came or not, the Pandaria continent was a terrifying powder keg that would ignite at the slightest touch. Chapter 1936. Indeed, Duque felt that the current alliance definitely had the strength to wipe out the entire Pandaria. There would only be one result. The alliance would become the alliance of fear or father's enemy 3. If such a thing happened in the game, even Daddy Blizzard would not be able to stand it. Duque definitely knew the structure of the various races on Pandaria. Which idiots deserved to die and which fellows could be kept alive. The problem was that Comrade Old Shin, who was technically a native creature, did not even know. Yet, an outsider like Duque suddenly said that he was a charlatan and wanted to kill all the mantises on Pandaria. How would Old Shin look at him? Spoilers might be bad, but it was enough. Look, didn't people often say, spoilers are fun for a while, but the whole family goes to the crematorium? The Alliance was no longer the scum organization that still used wooden warships to fight to Pandaria in history. The more overwhelming the strength, the more humble and cautious they were. This was the bearing of a big country, a big organization. Okay, that's it for today. No one really knows what the situation on Pandaria is like for more than 2,000 years. I hope to send an elite delegation to enter Pandaria accompanied by Lily and Shin Tempest Liquor. Understand the situation first. It's best to have a diplomatic visit with the Pandaren and other neutral or righteous organizations to reach a consensus against the evil forces of Ashaka. This sentence was directed at everyone. The next sentence was for the military. According to Chen, Pandaria is a continent with complicated terrain. Under the premise that we can't use weapons of mass destruction, it's inevitable to enter ground and close combat. Based on this, please quickly formulate a battle plan for mountain warfare in the Alliance military. At this point, Duque's speech was actually fine. The next sentence was like taking off one's pants and farting. As for the Horde's warships, immediately send out pursuit troops to let as few Horde enter Pandaria as possible. Because the Horde will become a disaster. You, Duque, were the one who put those broken Horde ships into Pandaria. Now you're asking us to formulate a battle plan for fighting in the hills and forests. The Alliance generals wanted to beat someone up. Only General Taylor smiled bitterly. On the other side, Brainless Roar's army was quite miserable. For all the survivors, this was definitely a nightmarish escape. First, he bumped into the Alliance's patrol team. Then, he was extremely lucky. He fired a few cannons randomly and took down 3 of the Alliance's flying ships in the middle of the night. After that, they engaged in a cannon battle with the Alliance's pursuing fleet and fought evenly. That would be strange. Looking over, Gurus felt that he still had a lot of fleets left. He had thought that once they were discovered by the Alliance, it would be good if only half of them remained. Who would have thought that there would be nearly 5/6 left? As they left the Alliance's absolute air defense circle, the captains of the Horde's ships realized that something was wrong when they counted their losses. The losses were too great. Most aerial battles would result in the destruction of the ship and the death of the pilot. Why does it feel like if the ship is not destroyed, the people will die? He didn't feel it at night. In any case, there were screams and chaos everywhere. In order to not become a target in the dark, no one was allowed to light a fire unless the ship was on fire. Whatever pain you have, hold it in for me. Anyone who dared to light a fire to see if they were injured would jump off the airship. In the morning, most of the captains found that their ships had become a slaughterhouse. The Alliance seemed to be pursuing a high hit rate, so they used a large number of shrapnel bullets called 3-style bullets. These shrapnel bullets were the upgraded version of the grape shot bullets from the gunpowder era. Their target was purely soft damage, and they were aiming for human lives. For this sudden expedition, the Horde had gathered a large number of elite infantrymen. Almost every ship was stuffed like a can of sardines. It was completely crowded. Unless the captain insisted that no more people were allowed on board, the ship would crash. The commanders of the various Horde forced people in. As a result, facing the Alliance's shrapnel bullets, these Horde warriors, who could easily fight 10 people in close combat, lost their lives just like that. After the Alliance's shells penetrated the armor of the Horde's warships, they quickly exploded, forming a sharp cone-shaped killing area like an ice cream bucket. All the Horde warriors in that area were shot into a hornet's nest. Even if they were alive, most of them were seriously injured, lying in pools of blood and moaning in pain. In order to avoid the cannons that repeatedly hit the side of the ship, many airships crashed because the people inside all scrambled to the other side, causing the airship's propellers to lose balance and eventually crash. If the Horde had enough resources, they could give every elite Horde warrior a full set of armor, enough food, and medical supplies. Armor. Even the fiercest orc warriors didn't like to wear full body armor. This made them extremely weak in front of shrapnel. And on a ship, who would wear heavy armor that weighed more than 100 pounds? Speaking of medicine, at the beginning of the apocalypse, after the Horde and the Alliance became enemies, the Horde's medicine supply was completely cut off. Other than the herbs that the shamans made themselves, it could be said that the injured Horde warriors could not receive any effective treatment. The apocalypse also destroyed the natural environment in most areas, which led to a further decrease in the supply of herbs. If it wasn't for the Horde's extremely barbaric tradition, injuries basically relied on self-healing. If self-healing failed, you deserved it. Other than a few cries from your loved ones, no one took it seriously. If it was the Alliance that had a large lack of medicine, which led to an increase in casualties, they would have long exploded. The Fire of Heaven has 81 warriors that can still fight. The Mammoth has 219. Magatha, who was beside him, reported to Garush, which made the Great Chief very upset. The breakout plan was a success, but only a small part of it was successful. He had brought so many elites, but half of them died in the sky. This kind of sh*t made Garush go crazy. Great Chief, what about the wounded? On almost every ship, the wounded are several times more than the number of people who can still fight. Let the seriously injured people end their own lives. We are not weak dogs of the Alliance. A true Horde warrior, after suffering a fatal injury, will always find an enemy on the battlefield that can perish together with him. Garush roared angrily. His thunderous voice made everyone tremble with fear as they conveyed his orders. No one noticed that the violent aura in their great chief's eyes was spreading uncontrollably. Fear, madness, anger, doubt, confusion, hatred, and pride. 7 terrifying auras formed 2 small vortexes. In Garush's bloodshot eyes, they impressively replaced the most central pupil. Then, a tragic scene occurred. The seriously injured orcs were ending their own lives. One by one, they were either forced or chose to jump from the side of the ship into the cold sea. Chapter 1937. The Black Dragon used her fingertips to control the fire elements to help Duque roast chicken wings. Vashj, on the other hand, held her cheeks and used the water element to control the front line. From another perspective, if the living resources were abundant, who would be willing to let their relatives and friends cut off their own lives? Duque hid in Naxxramas and still did not show his face in public. Unfortunately, as long as it was a livelihood, it needed strong economic support. At this time, not many people noticed that they had actually entered Pandaria and were beginning to be affected by Yashaji's murderous aura. It was normal for Vashj not to show up personally. Generally speaking, gods had their own style. Even demigods did not come out so easily. Beastmen were ruthless to others and also to their own people. This should be considered a subsidiary of a subsidiary. Although there were small islands scattered around the jadeite forest in the southwest, the altitude was lower. Other than those damn reefs, it was one of the few options for ships to reach Pandaria. It was late at night, there was no moonlight, and the visibility was frighteningly low. This was also amazing. Even if the route was deviated, it should go to the Mantis Plateau in the west, or the Beast Island in the north. Traditional beastmen would despise those cowards who were injured and disabled on the battlefield but shamelessly lived on and occupied the clan's living resources. They contacted and helped the local Pandaren in the jadeite forest to remove the other party's control. The Pandaren of Sweet Dew Village and the Horde defeated the Alliance army in the north. The Pandaren of Morningwind Village and the Alliance defeated the Horde army in the south. The effects of the war began to appear. The Pandaren sent Zhu Tulan to personally try to stop the war, but to no avail. Master, it's done. I sent Carathilas to negotiate. Now the pearl-finned wraiths have agreed to join Master's water elemental army. Vashj smiled. In a situation where there was not enough food, the old and the weak were abandoned. This was a matter of course for traditional beastmen, but Sal could not accept it. In a sense, Sal's way of doing things in the Horde was not bad. Oh, it's really simple. It was an exaggeration to say that it was a song, but it was just a random humming. Just like the Alliance, all kinds of post-war bills and war bills implemented a social security system. It ensured the continuation of the bloodline of the soldiers who sacrificed themselves for the Alliance and the safety of their loved ones. That was why the soldiers were united and fearless of sacrifice. Now, with the 4 great elemental lords and the support of Fate's hands, the pearl-finned goldfish people in the jadeite forest were willing to join the Alliance. They weren't even considered a subsidiary race because they relied on the subsidiary races of the Alliance. Almost every tribe warrior threw the blame to the Alliance. This clockwise turn from the northwest to the southwest was simply a crazy flight route. The most brain-dead thing was that the flight route actually passed right in front of Naxxramas, which was flying west. It was precisely because of the lack of survival resources that the tribe developed such a barbaric and violent tradition, not to raise trash. That was because they couldn't really enter the Pandaria region after reaching the shore. In the original history, the Alliance ship Heaven Seeker, which was escorting the tribal prisoners of war, had crashed on the back of the giant turtle, causing the giant turtle to almost be sucked into the giant whirlpool and self-destruct. Some of the Pandaren on the island joined the alliance and the Horde under the leadership of the Water and Earth factions Monk Aisha Cloud Song and the Fire Gold factions G Firepong. Their heroic self-destruction attracted sharks and other creatures in the sea. That kind of mournful mood triggered a further reaction. For example, during the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, the Orc warlock Necros, who helped the Dragon Maw clan chief Zuluhid control Alexstrasza, was despised by his clansmen and even the entire tribe because he was lame. The old had no one to rely on, and the young had no one to raise. He was in a good mood, humming a song as he ate the barbecue. "I'll just quietly watch you court death, and I won't interrupt you. You're stupid, and you're sending yourself to death." Duque, a guy who became a god as a mortal, was definitely an exception. Everyone knew that Duke never thought of himself as a high and mighty god. The surviving troops of the Alliance and the Horde set up military camps in the north and south of the Jadeite Forest, forcing the local Pandaren to work in preparation for the war. Huh? After asking, Duque didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of course, there wouldn't be any Xuantian in this life. Suddenly, a secret communication was connected, and Jaina immediately said, "Not good. The Horde is in trouble." Several airships had crashed on the island of disorientation, which was the body of the giant sea turtle, Shenzhen. And one of the airships smashed into the big turtle's head. Shenzhen should have fainted. He seems to be drifting in the direction of the Great Maelstrom. As long as they didn't light up the lights, the Horde's airships, which relied on their vision to search for the enemy, would probably be able to maintain silence and fly within 3 kilometers without the Horde noticing. Bulang Bronzebeard looked at the dense dots on the radar, each of which represented a Horde airship. He couldn't help but complain, "Damn it. Getting rid of these Horde now is easier than killing wild ducks by the pond with an old-fashioned gun 100 years ago." Beside him, Vashj and Onyxia looked like they had been left out. What the hell? Under Brainless Roar's mysterious navigator, they first deviated east, then went straight south, and finally made a miraculous turn west to land in the Jade Forest area. Normally, the shortest route from Orgrimmar to Pandaria should be to Thunder God Island in the northwest of the Pandaria continent. After Sal came to power, the situation was much better. Of course, for the sake of their great commander's plan, the Alliance had to order Naxxramas and the thousands of airships around it to move north. The mystery of Pandaria was a mystery because there were many incredible places on this continent. "Come on. For the end of the Horde," Jaina teased. This was equivalent to going in a big circle around Pandaria to reach their destination. Brainless Roar, you idiot. You're driving AF** King spaceship. Duque wanted to kill someone. Sometimes, he also made things difficult for his subordinates. Yes, for the end of the Horde. At some point, hundreds of generals in the command center responded in unison. In the slave camp, Sal had seen too many tragedies. If it was a ship sailing on the sea, it really couldn't be said that the Horde was at fault. This was because the entire western, northwestern, and northern edges of the continent and islands of Pandaria were all steep stone walls that were hundreds of meters high. Without climbing tools, just reaching the shore was useless. Chapter 1938. First, the Alliance's flying ships had long since become all steel, powered by a diesel engine and a magic array anti-gravity system. Second, and most importantly, the naming method of the Alliance's warships had been monopolized by that bastard Duque. Duque rarely abused his power and wantonly named the Alliance's new warships after the Second World War ships on Earth. Except for the earliest Heavenbreaker, Duque monopolized all the naming rights for the new warships that followed. The dwarves and gnomes were also helpless. The glue rule was that whoever invented it named it. Although they were all flying ships, everyone knew that the new turbines, engines, power systems, and wind tunnel experiments on the hull construction of the second-generation pure diesel version of the flying warships were all done by Duque. Third, the latest version of the Alliance's flying warships, even the old diesel flying warships that had not yet been retired, were all equipped with anti-gravity emergency systems. Unless the hull was directly blown in half in mid-air, even if the power system was lost, the ship could still slowly descend after the emergency magic array was activated. To avoid the ship being destroyed and people dying. It was simply a sin. The tribal flying ships that had been wounded by the Alliance's Type 3 bombs and sub-cannons actually survived for more than 1,000 kilometers and crashed into the giant tortoise-like dumplings falling into a pot near the Shenzhen Z. Duque's goal was to not destroy the ships even if people died. The effect was remarkable, but unfortunately there were side effects. Now it was clear that in order to escape, the tribe collectively made a large number of ships that could not withstand the emergency landing. When they saw a small island, they went to play crashing into the flying ships. Duque's maids had long been told that as long as Duque was not practicing swordsmanship inside, Storm and his nephew were to directly bring them in, so Vanessa opened the door. As soon as the door was opened, Duque heard the cries of the panda Lily, Storm. "Big brother Duque, please save the lost island." Duque rushed to the secret monitoring room of Naxxramas with the two uncle and nephew as he promised. "Well, no problem, the Alliance will not sit back and watch a friend die." Old Chen was a panda man who had lived for a long time, and he did not believe such words at first. Then, he thought of Duque's other identity, the demigod of Azeroth. Old Chen fell silent. No matter what, as long as there was a glimmer of hope, no one wanted their hometown to be destroyed. The monitoring room was not far from Duque's study. It was also a special space attached to the center of Naxxramas. Inside, Duque's other maid, Solarian, had already opened a series of magic mirrors. Originally, Duque could have done this in his study, but Duque wanted it to be more formal. Shenzhen might have a concussion. He's completely unconscious. According to the data sent by our scout ship, there seems to be a lump in its head caused by congestion. With Solarian's explanation, the uncle and nephew saw the head of their old home, the giant turtle, swollen to the size of a goose. Crack. Old Chen suddenly clenched his fists because he saw battles erupting everywhere on Shenzhen's back, which was the so-called Lost Island. In this day and age, there were still no high-powered optical magnifiers. If the Alliance's scout ships wanted to obtain a clearer optical image, they could only let Morningstar wizards risk releasing Magician's Eye ahead. This small eye made of arcane magic could fly to a distance of about 1 kilometer and observe the situation at a close distance. The image was a little blurry, but it could still be clearly seen. A group of burly, green-skinned warriors were slaughtering the black and white Pandaren. It was not a battle, because Old Chen recognized at a glance that it was the Chihan winery he often went to. The bright red bamboo trees around seemed to have some magic, because their petals could maintain their former color for a few months after they were plucked. But at this moment, they, along with the surrounding villages, were in a sea of fire. The ground was littered with the corpses of ordinary Pandaren. Orcs wielding battle axes were fighting the Pandaren from the Great Net Farm and Verdant Village, and even the warrior monks of Wuchen Temple. Seeing this scene, Duque almost laughed like a pig in his heart. He never thought that the tribe's intelligence would drop after following the brainless roar for so long. He didn't know if it was because they were provoked, but they actually attacked the Pandaren indiscriminately. This was a godlike assist to the Alliance. Old Chen gnawed on the bamboo leaf that he often held in his mouth. Duque knew that this old panda was most likely furious. His hometown was messed up by a group of people who used to be his friends. This feeling of betrayal was more annoying than a group of strange bandits suddenly coming to his door. Old Chen already had self-control not to go berserk on the spot. On the other side, Lily was crying non-stop. "Commander Marcus, do you have any good ideas?" Old Chen tried his best to make his voice sound calm. Duque, winner of the Azeroth Oscar, had a heavy expression on his face. "The tribe above is just a small problem. Later, I will send a few fast airships. Old Chen, you will lead the Alliance's elites over, and they will soon be suppressed. The key is Shenzhen's coma." "Yes." Old Chen was still nervous. Lily, who was next to him, looked at Duque with a sorrowful expression. If Duque was a person overflowing with love like Kalia, he would probably immediately fall for that pair of watery black eyes. Duque didn't keep him in suspense and directly changed the topic. fortunately. The Alliance has experience in dealing with similar things. 30 years ago, I used almost the same trick to save the lives of 50,000 elite soldiers of Storm City. Duque snapped his fingers, and Vashj, who had followed him in, immediately began to transform. A 6-armed Naga with a snake tail startled old Shen and his nephew. Vashj crossed her 6 arms in front of her chest and bowed to old Shen and his nephew. I am Vashj, Master Marcus Maid. Currently, I am in charge of the tidal throne on behalf of Master. I command 200,000 Naga warriors and 2 million fishmen. The simple introduction caused old Shen's heart to tremble. He had long heard that the Alliance was amazing, with several demigods overseeing it. But he really didn't know that the Alliance was so amazing. However, Vashj explained to old Shen in a few words how Duke used a weak Murloc clan to drag a huge block of ice to save the people. After listening, old Shen's blood surged, and his heart thumped in his chest. As long as we can save the Lost Island, the Alliance will be a friend of the Pandaren forever. Old Shen solemnly declared. If old Shen was the leader of the Pandaren, he would probably swear to let the Pandaren join the Alliance. Unfortunately, old Shen was not. The official leader of the Pandaren was Xiaohao. The problem was that this Pandaren emperor, who had the same name as the mythical character from before Duque transmigrated, had been hanging for 10,000 years. Chapter 1939. In the ancient war, the Night Elves went overboard and attracted President Shaman to worship them like a god. In the end, they blew up the Well of Eternity and the ancient Kalimdor continent. The Pandaren Emperor, Emperor Xiaohao, calmly raised his staff in front of all the people and cast a spell. The entire Pandaria broke free from the main continent of Kalimdor, like a huge Noah's Ark, quietly and alone drifted into the depths of the sea. At the same time, a thick fog rose from the surrounding sea, carefully wrapping the entire Pandaria continent. From then on, Pandaria was hidden and no longer harassed by the outside world. Seeing that their home was finally saved, all the Pandaren couldn't hold back their excitement. They couldn't wait to cheer and celebrate. The entire Pandaria began to celebrate. Every Pandaren was jumping and laughing happily, celebrating their survival. Unexpectedly, just as the panda people were celebrating, Emperor Xiaohao fell to the ground with a thud under everyone's watchful eyes. The emperor, who had worked his whole life to save his people, fell just like that and never got up again. Gradually, the emperor's entire body seemed to be disintegrated. Yes, he also turned into fog, lingering and becoming a part of the continent under the feet of his beloved people. This was the story of the last emperor of the Pandaren Empire. His legend had come to an end. The emperor was gone, and the Pandaren Empire collapsed. In a standard sense, the various Pandaren forces were actually independent. This was why Duque valued old Shen so much. In a sense, according to the later development of history, old Shen could barely be said to be the leader of the Pandaren. Because the activity of this uncle and nephew ran through the entire time node. Old Shen left. He sat on the high-speed battlecruiser, Scharnhorst, that Duque had specially prepared for him. She, her sister ship, Gneisenau, and several Z-series destroyers formed a high-speed commando team and rushed to the Lost Island at maximum speed. Following on the ship were the most elite Marines of the Alliance, as well as an elite squad of the Silver Hand Knights led by the female dwarf paladin, Lena Thunderspear. Why Lena? Firstly, it was too exaggerated to send out a marshal of Gavin Rad's level for such a small-scale battle. Secondly, dwarves were naturally forthright, and it was easier for females to gain their approval than males. In the end, it was her. When old Shen and his nephew rushed to the Lost Island, the battle was still going on. The arrival of the Alliance's flying battleship had also caused the Pandaren to panic and overreact. The Alliance's ships that had received Duque's warning were very smart. Their sorcerers created a huge holographic projection and projected old Shen's image onto the bow of the Alliance's ships. On the way here, he asked old Shen for the Panda Man's emblem. In just an hour, a bunch of temporary letterpress emblems were tied to every Alliance commando. They were tied to their arms and pauldrons to ensure that the Pandaren could see them from all angles. Old Chen even taught them Pandaren language. There was only one sentence: Old Chen asked us to help. The Pandaren on the Lost Island were overjoyed. Shenjinzi's back, the Lost Island, was a medium-sized island. In reality, the oval back of this ancient giant tortoise was about 4 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide. There were only a few thousand Pandaren living on it. Although many of the Pandaren monks were quite powerful, they were still powerless against more than 2,000 fully armed tribal elites who had fallen from nearly 10 airships. Before the airship could completely descend, Old Shen had already descended from the sky from a height of 50 meters. Before he landed, he leaped and swung his huge stick. Using the terrifying power of gravity to accelerate, he swung it diagonally and swept it horizontally. Bang! 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 A total of 7 or 8 orc warriors, their burly bodies weighing more than 400 kilograms, were all swept away by Old Chen. Phew! Old Chen exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Through the gap of his round hat that was missing a corner, his cold and angry eyes were revealed. He immediately spat out a mouthful of liquor, and the high alcohol content of Drunken Cloud turned into a fire breath spell when it came into contact with the flames. The 2 howling orc centurions who were charging at him turned into 2 human-shaped torches. Old Shen, tell everyone that the humans in golden armor are my helpers. Got it. Old Shen, who was dressed as a gardener, immediately understood. In the midst of the battle, a burst of shouts spread out. In the sky, the Alliance's airships did not fire their cannons. This distance was not suitable for parachuting. Because it was too slow. Hundreds of ropes hung down from each airship. The Alliance Special Forces, who had been trained in high-altitude rope rapid descent, descended from the sky in armor. As soon as they landed, they directly fought with the orcs. Even if they were accidentally attacked by the Pandaren, they just grinned and said in unfamiliar Pandaren language, Old Chen, found me. The entrance of the Alliance soldiers quickly eased the battle situation. More importantly, with the actions of the Alliance commandos, countless bubbles began to float on the surface of the sea. Thousands of murlocs swam over. These noisy murlocs, under the leadership of Naga, began to climb to the edge of Shinjinzi's turtle shell and threw the ropes over. The female Naga siren priest directly froze these ropes. 1, 2, 3. Pull. The murlocs worked hard, and the Naga shouted. The Pandaren on the entire Lost Island could clearly feel that the Lost Island, which had begun to move in the direction of the Great Whirlpool, seemed to be breaking away from the suction of the Great Whirlpool. Occasionally, the Pandaren who were free ran to the shore and were surprised to see tens of thousands of murlocs trying to pull the Lost Island in the opposite direction. Not only the murlocs, but in the direction of the Great Whirlpool, a huge fish-shaped monster floated to the surface. It pressed its forehead hard against the Lost Island, and a huge tail slapped the water hard, trying to pull the Lost Island out. In addition to it, more water elements emerged from the bottom of the sea. They raised their thick arms and pushed the island hard. The battle on the Lost Islands was still ongoing. Half an hour later, the Alliance fleet arrived. Hundreds of airships threw down ropes, secured the island with the help of the Naga, and then pulled the island out of the Great Whirlpool at full power. An hour later, even Naxxramas arrived. This behemoth, which was no smaller than the Lost Island, played a vital role. Hundreds of thousands of energy beams swung down from Naxxramas and grabbed the edge of the Lost Island by itself. It took half an hour to drag and pull the unconscious Shinjinzi out of the dangerous waters. At this time, the battle on the island was over. More than 2,000 orc warriors were wiped out. Every corner of the island rang with the cheers of the Pandaren. Long live the Alliance! Chapter 1940. This was definitely an accident. Duque dared to swear that there was absolutely no such scene in the original history. He couldn't imagine how brainless the tribal warriors were to start a massacre as soon as they landed. This made something that could be said to be farsighted happen. The Pandaren spontaneously praised the alliance. Because not only did the alliance send people to save their people according to Old Shen's request, but the alliance also did the heroic deed of saving Shinjinzi. It was a miracle to drag an ancient giant tortoise that weighed 10,000 tons. The Pandaren of the Lost Island held a grand welcome ceremony for the arrival of the alliance. There were red lanterns, firecrackers, couplets, and even lion and dragon dances everywhere. This made Duque, who had secretly come to the Lost Island, think that he had returned to the countryside of the Celestial Empire. That kind of ink painting of the countryside made Duque feel very comfortable. What surprised Duke the most was that the leaders of the Earth and Water faction and the Fire Gold faction, the two Pandaren sects that came from different eras, Aisha Cloudwalker and G Firepalm, both of them wanted to join the alliance at the same time. That's right. They wanted to join the alliance. Duque clearly remembered that Ji Huazhang of the Huazhang sect had directly joined the Horde in history. Why did they join the alliance? Would there still be Pandaren in the Horde? With a shudder, Duque immediately came to a realization. No wonder the Huazhang sect made this choice. First, it was the Horde who attacked the Lost Island, and no matter how you looked at it, the Horde was evil, and the alliance was simply the messenger of justice. Second, the alliance looked more powerful. At first glance, it was obvious that the alliance's warships were far superior to the Horde's level. The alliance's Naxxramas and the Marine Race Army were completely showing their muscles. If they still foolishly joined the Horde at this time, then, what about the tribal warriors who were killed? Wasn't this what a certain transmigrator often heard in the Celestial Empire, 49 years to join old Jiang? For fighters like the Pandaren, Duque would definitely accept them. The profession of warrior monks, even if it became a little awkward in the later stages, their strength was neither strong nor weak, and their development prospects overlapped with other melee professions. But this was war, and the professions played the role of elites in war. They were not simply ordinary soldiers who were regarded as consumables by many generals, and there were no rigid requirements for logistics. Upon entering the elite level, the diversification of development would cause the enemy to be at a loss as to what to do. Speaking of which, how many people know that pandas are actually ferocious beasts? Soon, another piece of information attracted Duque's attention. After returning to Naxxramas and carefully examining the corpses of the Horde warriors, O.L. Chen said with certainty, "These orc warriors have a murderous aura." Huh? Baleful aura? Duque's system elf had indeed analyzed the aura of Yashaji, but Duque was surprised that old Chen, a Pandaren who had never seen Yashaji before, was so sure. Not only old Chen, but even the big sister of the Earth and Water faction, Aisha, and the big shot of the Fire Gold faction, Jihuazhang, came to the same conclusion. This must be an evil orc who had been instructed by Yashaji to head to Pandaria in order to resurrect Yashaji. This conclusion made the Alliance elders nervous. If it was just to beat up the Horde, the Alliance wouldn't care no matter how many Horde warriors there were. If the ancient gods were involved, then it would be a different matter. The two ancient gods who had already appeared could be said to be more formidable than the other. Si Thun had merely let the Kiraj insectoids wreak havoc on half of the Kalandor continent. Yogg-Saron had controlled the entire Otter, and had almost controlled the 4 guardians, Garrican. A total of 5 guardians had been controlled. The Alliance had cooperated with the Guardians many times and was well aware of their strength. At the level of the Guardians, conventional weapons were completely ineffective. Cannonballs were just explosive reactions of the fire element to the Guardians, plus flying items that were slightly faster. The high-level laws on the Guardians directly ignored them. It was this kind of Guardian that was tricked by a stupid dragon into 5. Since they were destined to be enemies, Duque also pretended to ask Tyrant, and then went to ask Tarim, the king of thunder and lightning, as well as Mimiran, to get a large number of books and records about the ancient gods. Tyrant had mainly obtained Alun's records. Tarim got first-hand information about the Guardians' battles. Everyone knew how huge Yashaji's body was and how terrifying its influence was. Hearing about the murderous aura, the most sensitive nerves in the hearts of the Alliance and Pandaren were touched. Under the discussion of the Pandaren and the big bosses of the Alliance, they quickly put the blame on the Horde. At first, Duque thought that this was slander, because in history, Brain-Dead Roar didn't become the public enemy of Azeroth so quickly because of the murderous aura. Later on, Duque realized that he didn't even think of it. What was this about putting the blame on? Brain-Dead Roar was really full of shit. What happened next was mostly in the direction of history. For example, the Zandala trolls who had stood on the side of the Alliance when the Alliance attacked Zul'Gurub. William allowed the more rational faction of the trolls to continue to stay on their island in Stranglethorn Vale, acknowledging that it was the territory of the Zandala trolls. But the situation changed. After seeing the Alliance destroy Zwaman and Zul'Gurub, the Zandala trolls had a different view of the Alliance. Some of the trolls believed that the Alliance would attack them sooner or later. In this situation, long before the Cataclysm, the prophet, Zul, predicted that Zandala Island would be destroyed by the Cataclysm led by the Wing of Death, but the King of Zandala turned a deaf ear. When Zandala Island was destroyed, the King of Zandala was powerless to stop it. This time, Zandala was determined to go all out for the continuation of the trolls. After a long period of obscurity, this time, Zandala put himself in a leadership position to lead all the trolls and fight for their survival. In any case, the wise men of Zandala were completely convinced by Zul at this moment. They believed that only war could prevent the extinction of the ancient race of trolls that had existed in this world since the creation of Azeroth. Most of the troll tribes were unified under the banner of Zandala rebuilding the glory of the Troll Empire, including the defeated forest trolls of Zwaman and the Gurubashi forest trolls that had split into countless scattered tribes all over Stranglethorn Vale. Stranglethorn Vale was very large and had a lot of caves. Even when the Alliance occupied the entire Stranglethorn Vale, there were still a large number of trolls hiding in the caves, struggling at death's door. It was under Zul's call that these trolls all rushed out and attacked many of the Alliance's civilian ports. They used old-fashioned wooden warships to form a large but not powerful fleet, preventing the destruction of Zandala. And Duque took advantage of this. Chapter 1941. The Alliance in Azeroth had long been modified by Duque to the point where it was almost unrecognizable. Before the Cataclysm, the Alliance had a strict radar warning system. Especially on the west coast of the Eastern Kingdom, where humans and dwarves were the majority, there was a radar station every 100 kilometers. Each radar station was stationed with at least one company of soldiers, with 3 griffins or hippogriffs. There were also coastal patrols 3 times a day. If the Alliance could discover the Horde's flying fleet, how could they not discover the Zandala trolls? William had suggested to Duque if they should strike first. Duque shrugged. Why should we stop them from leaving the Eastern Kingdom? Is it because there are too many soldiers in Stormwind and they like to play with trolls all over Stranglethorn Vale? If they leave, there will be one less problem. When the time comes, we will have an excuse to intervene in Pandaria. Stranglethorn Vale was thousands of kilometers from north to south. Even the Kiraji bugmen were a huge problem. It was impossible to kill all the trolls in the underground space that was similar to stalactites. Now that they had come out to die, it couldn't be better. Sure enough, Duque's personal thief, Edwin Van Cleef, quickly sent back news that Zandala's boss, Zul, had decided to ally with Zandala's ancient ally, the Ancient Devils. Thus, Zandala was on the opposite side of the Alliance for the first time. The Ancient Devils gathered under the leadership of the weapons master, Theon, and planned to take advantage of the chaos to regain control of Pandaria. At this time, the main force of Pandaria transported by the Horde's airship began to set up military camps in the south of Jade Forest, forcing the local Pandaren to work in preparation for the war. Gurus used violence to enslave the Pandaren of Sweet Dew Village and began a massacre, wiping out the Pandaren of Morning Breeze Village. Taking advantage of the conflict between the Macaques and the Goldfish people, they joined forces with the Macaques to attack the Pearlfin Goldfish people's territory. They didn't expect the Alliance to make a move first. The silly Macaques ran to Pearlfin Village and were ambushed by the Goldfish people and Naga. But the war also caused the influence of Fiend to appear. The Pandarin's boss, Zhu Tulan, personally tried to stop the war but to no avail. At this time, a Dragon Maw clan beastman who had been liberated by Sao from the shelter, Kirk, was on his way to Pandaria when his spaceship crashed on the coast of the Jadeite forest. The spacecraft crashed into an auspicious dragon in the clouds. The mother dragon died to protect the young dragon and entrusted the young dragon to Kirk. One man and one dragon struggled to survive on the coast of Pandaria. Kirk decided to hand the dragon over to the Cloud Dragon Knights. However, Pandaman Elder only urged him to stay and asked him to raise this young dragon. He agreed and decided to let the Flying Dragon tribe listen to her and become a real dragon-throat orc. However, his philosophy conflicted with the Pandaren of the Knights. Due to his injuries, the training did not go well. Later, the Horde's General Nazgrin personally led the Horde's army to attack the Pearl Finns village. This time, he was almost dragged into the water by Vasht's subordinate, the Deepwater Lord Caratheras, to teach him how to reincarnate as a murloc. The tribe suffered a great loss, and nearly 5,000 orc warriors died. However, this intense battle had freed all the baleful auras from their seals. During this period, the Pandaman wanderer Zhozhua came into contact with the Horde. He was still searching for the ancient prophecy, but he could not prevent the outbreak of war and the release of the baleful auras. The baleful aura of doubt raided the Green Dragon Temple, corrupting and slaughtering a large number of Pandaman monks. The baleful aura of despair occupied the Vermilion Bird Temple. The baleful aura of fear broke the seal and escaped from the cave where the Mantis people were hiding and invaded the palace of the Mantis People Empire. The great Empress Shakhil and her subjects were controlled, and the Centennial Reincarnation War broke out 10 years earlier. The Mantis army attacked the Great Wall, and the Bison were forced to break through the Black Bull Pass and escape into the pass. The baleful aura of anger escaped from the Shadowpan Monastery and took control of the Bison who had lost their homes. The cavalry army burned and plundered the Pandaman village in Kunlai Mountain, causing heavy casualties among the people. The baleful aura of violence and hatred started a war in the Shadowpan Monastery, and the main force of the Shadow Trace sect suffered heavy casualties. At this time, Old Shen had already entered Pandaria with some of the elites of the Lost Island. He was lobbying various forces to accept the alliance. Duque promised Old Shen that after more than half of the Pandamen in Pandaria agreed to let the alliance enter Pandaria, the alliance's fleet would enter this continent and destroy those evil races and existences. Naxxramas and the alliance's fleet were hovering over the sea 30 kilometers northeast of the giant Beast Island in the north of Pandaria, which happened to be a position that all Pandarians could not see with their eyes. More alliance fleets were gathering at sea and began to gather on the open sea between Stormport and New Kultiras Port. As the two large fleets were too large to be accommodated by the port, they could only anchor near the coast and wait for instructions from the alliance's military headquarters. Duque continued to drink tea in the secret room of Naxxramas. Well, this tea from the Lost Island is really good. This is the legendary Longjing before the Ming Dynasty. Duque made tea for Jaina with familiarity. Jaina blinked her beautiful eyes. Hey! Duke, don't tell me you've been to the Lost Islands before? You're so familiar with it. Hee hee. How is that possible? The Pandamen on the Lost Islands said that they had not seen any intelligent creatures other than Pandamen in the last 10,000 years. Duque laughed. He almost accidentally exposed his identity as a celestial. Forget it. As your wife, I have an obligation to keep your secret. But if you don't say it, I won't ask. You have too many secrets. Jaina rolled her eyes at Duque. Is it okay for the Alliance to just wait like this? Our daily consumption of food and fuel is skyrocketing. Duque shrugged. That's why I didn't mobilize everyone. Jaina was speechless. Although the Alliance was aggressive and had encircled the Horde on all fronts in Kalimdor, it was actually not an all-out war. Most of the officers and soldiers reported and stayed in the military camps of the various countries, stepping up their training and preparing to attack at any time. In fact, there was really no need for the millions of soldiers, reserves, and militia. The active army at the front line was only 100,000 infantry and less than 1,000 airships. In total, there were only 300,000 people. In addition, there were the Kirakis, which were free troops. The cost of fuel was very low because it was mainly needed by the army. The airships used elemental energy sent over by the magic net, which also didn't need money. The real headache was the food and drink of these troops, as well as the artillery ammunition that was about to expire. Compared to the enthusiastic donations of the Alliance, it was like a drizzle. Duque pointed at the crisscrossed map of power on Pandaria. I'm dragging this out to make some space in Pandaria. Pandaria is too crowded now. Chapter 1942. A chess player's basic skill was to watch at least 3 moves before taking a step. Good chess players could even see the next 10 moves of their opponent. Others who met Pandaria might say, wow. It's a whole new continent. Can we colonize it? Is there a new territory? Duque was thinking about how to fight the Burning Legion if they came. At present, the Alliance had completed or basically completed their military deployment in the Eastern Kingdom, Kalimdor, and Northrend. When the Legion was ready, they would be snowballed by the demons if they weren't careful when facing the Burning Legion spaceships dropping from the sky. They did not care about the spaceship that had just landed. In a while, the Eridar warlocks would directly open the teleportation door and send more void distortion demons over. More Eridar warlocks arrived, and they immediately opened more teleportation gates. 1 hour, they might only have to face hundreds of demons. If they didn't do anything for a day, the number might soar to 10,000. Anyway, there were billions of demons in the twisting nether. They would resurrect after being killed and run back to their corpses. The only thing stopping the demons from invading was the size of the portals, which was the number of troops sent out per unit of time. The Azeroth in reality wasn't as small as it was in the game. In the Elven Forest in the game, it would take 10 minutes at most to run from the westernmost to the easternmost on a horse. In reality, the Elven Forest was about 100 kilometers from north to south and 300 kilometers from east to west. It was also a forest with complicated terrain. People and horses had to be changed, and it would take a whole day to send a message. With such a vast area, if they were still as backward as in history, they could only rely on griffins to find it. Most of the troops had to rely on the 4 legs of horses to run. By the time they arrived, it would be too late. If Duque was given another 10 years, Duque was confident that the 3 continents would be able to hold on. At least, they wouldn't collapse. When they reached Pandaria, there wouldn't be any empty space without a major operation. Of course, Duque knew that the devilish ancients, mantis men, and Zandala trolls weren't good people. The Alliance couldn't just start a massacre, right? Anyway, they were strong and had a lot of capital. The Alliance just quietly pretended to be cool and waited for the Horde and the evil races on Pandaria to die. In the following days, all kinds of information continued to come. Just like in history, Zandala successfully revived the first emperor of the ancient devils, the Thunder God, on the Island of Reckoning. The Zandala army was still overcast. They had found the ancient Devil Mountain's treasury and wanted to steal the powerful treasures inside. In the end, most of the Shadowpan monastery fell into the hands of the evil. Even the sect master, Zhu Talon, was controlled by the evil of hatred. Only Master Shuelyo and his disciples managed to restrain the threat of the evil of violence. Because the Alliance had old Shin take action, and with the help of Lena Lightspear and the other second-rate experts of the Alliance, the Shadowtrace sect was able to purge the Fiend's influence from the outside in. Zhu Tulan was also freed from the Fiend's control. After a short rest, Zhu Tulan finally realized that the situation in Pandaria was completely out of control. The Shadowtrace sect was an organization founded 10,000 years ago by the last emperor, Xiao Hao, who had gathered a group of top-notch experts. They wandered in the shadow of Pandaria, fulfilling their mission of guarding the fiends. As the current leader of the Shadowtrace faction, Zhu Tulan carried a heavy burden on his shoulders. He commanded all the warriors of the Shadow Trace faction and fought together with them to protect Pandaria from the invasion of outsiders. In a sense, he was the biggest obstacle in the Alliance's control of Pandaria. After all, in the eyes of the Pandaren, be it the Alliance or the Horde, they were all outsiders. Entering Pandaria without permission was the greatest provocation to the entire Pandaren race. It was a declaration of war. But the appearance of Old Shen and a group of Alliance elites made Zhu Tulan see something different. Old Shen, is the Alliance you speak of really so scrupulously abiding by the rules that they won't step into Pandaria without the consent of more than half of the Pandaren leaders? Old Shen chewed on the bamboo in his mouth and repeated what happened on the Lost Island. First of all, I have to admit that this interracial organization called the Alliance is 10,000 times stronger than we imagined. Secondly, they are the enemies of the orcs who slaughtered in the Jadeite forest. I heard that the evil orcs provoked a war against the Alliance. Since they couldn't beat the Alliance, they were most likely tempted by Yashaji and came to Pandaria to seek Yashaji's power. The most important thing is that the Alliance and the ancient gods are mortal enemies. They have already killed 2 ancient gods. I've seen the remains of the ancient gods with my own eyes, and I've felt the evil that hasn't faded from the Holy Light Seal. Moreover, the Alliance respects us Pandaren very much because we guard Yashaji's remaining Shah. I think we're on the same page as the Alliance. Also, including their commander, Duke Marcus, the Alliance has many demigods. Zhu Tulan was tempted. It was true that the Shadow Trace faction was the strongest evil suppression organization. At the same time, the Shadow Trace faction was also proud. They had been around for 10,000 years, waiting for the day when Yashaji came out. If not for this experience where even their leader was tricked, the Shadow Trace faction probably wouldn't let outsiders intervene, let alone an alliance dominated by humans. They were completely outsiders. Yashaji's spirit was terrifying. They had personally experienced it. The organization suppressing Shah all over Pandaria began to collapse, and the main force of the Shadow Trace faction also suffered heavy losses. In such a situation, no matter how stubborn Zhu Tulan was, he realized that the Shadow Trace faction alone, or even the entire Pandaren, couldn't suppress Shah and cause trouble all over the continent. When the Zandala trolls, Demonkin ancients, Mantis men, and the Horde joined forces, it might be the end of the Pandaren. The Pandaren were more homebodies, not eccentric and peace-loving, but they weren't stupid. They wouldn't sit still and wait for death. It was rare that such a powerful alliance was so polite and principled. It was really to the liking of the Pandaren, who regarded themselves as a race of etiquette. Thinking of this, Zhu Tulan made a decision. Old Shen, please introduce me to Marcus, the leader of the alliance you mentioned. I want to verify with my own eyes whether he and his alliance will help the Pandaran's future. Okay. No problem. Their people are here. They have a special way to contact us. Old Shen immediately found Lena Thunderspear. Lena immediately raised her wrist and pressed her right hand on the bracer with a special gesture. Silverhand 10086 calling 9527. Please answer if you copy. A second later, a crisp female voice came from the bracer, 9527 copy. Please speak. For the Pandaren, who respected tradition and relied on shouting to pass messages, and only rode the soaring dragon in emergencies, instant messaging was simply nonsense. After Lena finished speaking, another voice answered, May I ask if Sect Master Zhu wants a quick meeting or an immediate one? Huh. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.